Good morning, everybody.
Recording in progress.
Yes, our workshop meeting of September 20th, 2024 is now called to order. Thank you for our colleagues for taking the time to attend today's meeting. I am actually member Otto Lee, but just for the next few minutes, acts the acting chair until our chair or vice chair showed up. In the meantime, we do have refreshments and food. Everybody knows where the emergency places are. But oh, here you go. Our vice chair is here, but I'll keep it rolling. So in the unlikely event that we need to evacuate our assembly area is the parking lot at the corner of North First and River Oaks across from Starbucks. Nearest AED device is in the main lobby by the security guard. And to our members of the public, thank you for joining us. And I will announce when the board is ready to receive public comment, and we'll call those who are in person first, followed by those on Zoom. And those who want to address the board are encouraged to complete a blue speaker card and submit it to our board office staff before the item is heard. The speaker cards are available at the public information table. Virtual attendees can use the raise hand function in Zoom or press *9 if you are dialing in, and we'll take public comments at the conclusion of the presentation. And to my colleagues, please keep your mics muted until you're ready to speak. And when you want to speak, please call my attention, or the chair's attention, by raising your hand. And we'll have a full agenda, and we're expecting the meeting to last about 3 hours. And I would also request everyone in the room to mute your devices so we can avoid any audio feedback on your phone going off, or your pager, or walkie-talkie. I'm just kidding. But yeah, just make sure keep your phones silent. That'll be appreciated. And with that, Puneet, would you please do the roll call?
Yes. Abikoga. Absent. Blinkley. Absent. Burt.
Here.
Present, thank you. Cohen. Absent. Davis. Here. Present, thank you. Dean. Absent. Foley. Here. Present, thank you. Jane.
Here.
Thank you. Kamei. Here. Thank you. Lee.
Present.
Lee Ing.
Here.
Thank you. Mahan.
Here.
Thank you. Montano. Member Montano? Present, thank you. Rennie? Absent. Torres? Absent. Lopez?
Here.
Thank you. Chairperson Chavez? Absent. Thank you. You have a quorum.
Great, and with appreciation to Pro Tem Lee, it's a team effort here. Thank you for getting us started. So we'll go to the first item on our agenda, item 2.1, which is an update on VTA's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Extension Project Cost Savings Overview. A quick note before we go to staff. To ensure that we have ample time to get through all the items for our meeting today, I would like to request that my colleagues hold your questions until the designated break. Please feel free to take notes and jot down any questions you may have on the copy and notepads that you have at your place. We will then take public comment at the conclusion of the full presentation. Thank you for that. And with that, I'd like to welcome Tom McGuire, Chief Capital Mega Projects Delivery Officer.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and good morning, Directors. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today in depth about the work the team is doing to find cost savings and opportunities to generally reduce the cost of the BART Silicon Valley program. I'm joined today at the table by my deputy, Monica Bourne, the Deputy Chief of the BART program for VTA, Greg Thibault from our project management team. Greg has been one of the leads the design packages. He'll be speaking about some of the issues related to saving money at the stations, while Monica will be talking about saving money in the tunnel and the construction. And then I've got a few more. Chuck Morganson, our program manager, and Mike Lennon from our general engineering consultant will also be here to answer any questions you have about the material that we share. If we could have the next slide, please. Our objective today as your team is to, first of all, make sure we are all on the same page in terms of the program's budget gap and where we are in our path to federal funding for BART Silicon Valley. We will provide an overview of what we know now about some good candidates for cost savings. I think I've, in conversations with several of you this week, I just want to emphasize that we're trying to show our work as we're doing it here. So continue to try to meet that expectation you have that we're transparent. These are not fully cooked ideas. These are ideas where we want your feedback so we can shape them further and drill down a little deeper and come back with a more polished presentation later this fall that has more detailed cost estimates. But your feedback on the scope is really valuable to us today. On the screen, you'll see some of the criteria that Monica and Greg will be using to narrate their presentations. In addition to just how much, at least at a rough order of magnitude, costs we have, we're also going to talk about whether or not these options have a positive or negative impact on long-term operations and maintenance costs and our relationship with BART, the construction schedule, logistics, and impacts on communities, as well as for the station station ideas, impacts upon the passenger experience and the community experience. As the Vice Chair mentioned, we're going to present two blocks of ideas to you and pause twice for discussion. My hope is that we spend a lot of today in discussion, getting your feedback. We see the pause buttons there on the agenda. That's where we'll take a break and have a facilitated discussion for your feedback. I also want to note this is the same material that we shared with our community working groups on Wednesday night at the first of what will be several community working groups we do on cost savings. That took place at the San Jose Chamber of Commerce on Wednesday night. We got some really good feedback and I think some important both positive and cautionary notes from the community at that meeting. And that feedback is just as important to us as the feedback we get today. The questions that we'll be asking during those pauses are, first of all, what clarifying questions, what details would you like our technical experts to share with you? What do you want us to be looking for as we evaluate the trade-offs in moving some of these ideas forward? And highlighting any serious concerns you have right now so that we don't develop something that runs afoul of those concerns. And also, if there are aspects to this or ideas that you don't hear today, we want to hear those too. We want to make sure everything's on the table. And the reason we want everything to be on the table is because we are confronting the fact that even with the historic award of the historic commitment of over $5.1 billion, the maximum federal commitment we can receive through the VTA New Starts program, we still have a gap in our budget. And the pie chart you see on the screen shows the magnitude of that gap. On top, you see the $5.1 billion from the New Starts program. On the upper left, you see the up to $500 million that could be available from Measure A sources, from the uncommitted Measure A funds that could be available thanks to the action you took this spring, but which our preference would be to not be touching that right now and to save that for a true rainy day for this project. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you see the TBD. There's our budget is out of balance by at least by $700 million. And so as we work through the changes we talk about today, we are wanting to count to a number above $700 million. There's an important framework and what I think some of you have referred to as guardrails around this conversation. So what you're not going to hear today are ideas that get at the core integrity of the project. This is still a 5-mile tunnel with 4 stations that can open in early 2037. We're not talking about options to remove entire stations. We're not talking about options to miss that opening day. And we're not talking about options that back away from the core environmental commitments we've made to the community. And to go even deeper on what those guardrails mean, that means we're going to try to find cost savings that don't require a reopening of the environmental documents that were approved first in 2018 and then recertified this year by the VTA and by this board. We don't want to undermine our ridership forecast of 55,000 riders on opening day. And we don't want to introduce significant new risks to the construction or design that will cause the VTA to suggest adding additional costs to the budget when we do a risk assessment with them early next year. And then finally, a note on the timeline before we get into the really good stuff here. I know we talked about this in detail at the BSV2 committee, but I want to make sure that all the board members who are here see this timeline. So right now, we are working towards the VTA's published date. It's published on their website of a fall 2025 full funding grant agreement. And that is later than the date that we've talked about with the board, that we've been talking about with the board up until August. Until we learned on August 1st what our federal share would be, we were still trying to drive towards an FFGA this year. With the awareness of what the budget gap looks like, we know that that's not realistic. We've been told by the VTA that's not realistic, and we agree. And so we are driving towards a full funding grant agreement, being ready to receive and agree to a full funding grant agreement, regardless of what happens with the election and the next administration in 2025. And there's still a lot of work we need to do to meet that deadline. The most important, the critical path for us as the project leadership is to figure out the cost savings package and make sure we have the scope of this project nailed down by the end of this calendar year. And that's the gold star you see there on the screen. Doing that allows us to go into a risk assessment, risk refresh with the VTA staff in early 2025, and it allows us to submit an application in the spring of 2025 to stay on track for that full funding grant agreement. So I wanted to give that schedule context because I know the committee members may have heard it, but not all the full board members have heard that stated clearly. With that, I'm going to pass the microphone to my colleague Monica Bourne, and she's going to talk about cost savings ideas related to the tunnel, the BART yard, maintenance facilities, and design criteria.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Good morning, board members. So just wanted to let you know we are very serious about finding these cost-saving measures. I have asked our team to basically eat, drink, sleep cost savings. So we are doing what we can to try to figure out what we can do to come up with these cost-saving candidates and bring them to life. So with that said, I'm going to start off with the non-station elements of the project, specifically on the tunnel, yard, and criteria and requirements. So basically, with each of these candidates, the evaluation criteria for these members or these portions of the project, we're looking at 4 different criteria, starting off with, of course, the cost savings. That is basically based upon what we call a ROM, a rough order of magnitude. And as Tom said, we are still in the early phases of this. So the ROM costs are based upon information that we either already have and then going to be refining it as the design of these candidates gets developed. So it is rough at this time, as ROM stands for, and it's also based upon, or what we're indicating here is a range. The other 3 criteria that we're using, O&M is basically the cost to run and maintain the system. Construction schedule, of course, is duration, and construction logistics is basically how we're building it. These last 3 criteria, indicators are positive with a plus, meaning that we are potentially showing a cost savings or schedule savings. No change, negative change might be adding to the cost or schedule, and then NA, of course, is not applicable. So we'll dive right in to the tunnel. So starting off with the interior structure of the tunnel. So this cost savings right now, again, based upon the ROM costs that we have, we're anticipating a savings a range of 150 to 170 million. So this one is a nice candidate that we are looking at in more detail to see can this savings be achieved. It might also be a schedule savings too. So just to give you some information about what this candidate entails, on the right side of the screen, we've got the current cross-section of the tunnel, showing the 2 tracks there for a rail system. The structure itself is robust, and the proposed candidate, cost-saving candidate, is shown in the bottom portion of that, is more efficiently built and has less concrete in it. So it also might be a schedule savings there because it can be built potentially at a quicker pace. So again, we are looking at this more closely, starting off with the cross-section itself, the design itself, and then looking at the cost savings potentially for schedule, how to build it, and also how to maintain it too. So right now, looking at our initial assessment is positive across the board. Next item that we're looking at for cost savings is the muck off-haul. So just let you know what muck is. It's the excavated materials that we will be pulling out, excavated soil that we will be pulling out as we're tunneling through our project. Right now, the cost savings is a TBD. We need to do more analysis on this in order to verify what we believe would be the cost savings here. One of the off-haul options that we're looking at is taking the material and putting it into our salt ponds just north of the alignment. And our initial assessment right now now is basically showing even at this point in time, and again, because we need to do more analysis in order to verify this option. Our next one, I'm going to pause and let Tom jump in.
And before Monica gets into the details of this one, I just wanted to be clear about what this is and what this is not, because you see the word single bore and twin bore on the screen. This is a pretty targeted use of the principle of digging from both directions at the same time rather than digging a single tunnel from west to east. And Monica will explain what that means in terms of schedule and cost. I do also want to note for both committee members and the full board, a more detailed analysis of the twin bore, the promised cost update, and an update on construction impacts is coming to the BSV2 committee in October, on October 10th. So this is about a very tactical use of twin bore technology in a specific case. There is a broader discussion of twin bore coming to the committee in October.
Okay. All right. So back to the cost-saving candidate here that we're looking at. Again, looking at tunneling from the west and the east portal here. This particular item would be looking at twin bore between the east portal and our 28th Street station. And this one, right now, the cost savings, again, is a TBD. We need more analysis on the design schedule, and then we can look at the cost from there. Okay, next candidate, our yard. So the Newhall Yard, right now we are looking at several different options, hence the range is pretty wide. Cost savings anticipated could be 100 million to 300 million. And again, because we're looking at the various options for this one, this includes reduction in the storage capacity, maintenance areas, shop buildings, all of that. And of course, this will be a trade-off between what capital costs we could save with this and balancing it with the O&M cost running our system. The cost of those two will need to be looked at closely here. We are also looking at potentially refining the footprint of our parking garage and balancing that with a potential for surface parking over here. Initial assessment at this time, we're looking at a potential cost savings schedule savings, and then potentially the other items we just need to look at as we refine the design for this. What we're also showing up here, wanted to highlight that too, in the plan view that we show up here, the blue areas that are highlighted show the areas where potentially we could reduce the amount of storage or the buildings is what we're trying to convey here to give you some idea of that. Okay, and then the last one I'll be talking about is our criteria and requirements, and basically this is our design requirements that we use as we develop our drawings and our specifications. These are basically an agreement with BART, and therefore we go back to them to present what our cost-saving ideas are for discussion and also ultimate approval with them. Right now, we're looking at a range of $50 to $90 million for the cost savings here. And again, we also see for the initial assessment, a positive initial assessment, at least at this time, across the board. And now we're going to pause for discussion.
So colleagues, if I could, I just want to remind everybody that these are the non-station discussions. We're going to get right into the station discussion. So I'm going to give us about 10 minutes on this and then move us to the next section, if that's okay. And I see Suds waving wildly. Go ahead. We'll start with Suds.
Okay. I actually attended the CWG meeting, so I saw this presentation once before and asked the staff for some clarifying questions. Let's go to the tunnel interior reconfiguration. And they have two drawings here. The one is the one above and the one below. And I guess my question is, the proposed design uses less concrete, it's faster. Did it take not getting enough funding, being short of $700 million for us to go and look at how we can optimize this to save this money? I mean, what forced this redesign, and why wasn't this considered much earlier on? And is the is there's two areas where you guys are going to store the muck or the spoils.
I'm going to stop you. We'll get to muck next. You want
No,
them to
no, this
answer this
is-
question?
No, in this diagram.
Okay.
On the proposed, below those two trains, they're actually filling those cavities with muck. And so was there an anticipated use for that space for like conduits or something that we're now, or is that helping us with the buoyancy of the tunnel? I'd like to understand, I mean, I'm an engineer, so of course I'm going to dive into this. But fundamentally, are we leaving lots of other stuff on the table because we are not considering these kinds of, cost reductions, like the above one was over-designed? Same with the launch box. It seemed like it was over-designed, but now it's $525 million. So it wasn't over-designed. So I'm trying to get to what drove this change.
Let me answer the first question, and then I'll ask the team to answer the question about the muck. So this idea, we've been working on this idea since April. We have an optimization task force within the program. It's a joint effort of the PMT, VTA staff, the GEC, and KST. So we've been working on optimization ideas like this, not necessarily in reaction to the budget gap, but it's important for us to always be looking through this progressive design build model at ways to save money. Did the budget gap create more urgency? Absolutely. But this has been an idea that's been in our back pocket for a while, and we've been developing it. I think it's important to note that this will require some sign off on some important technical issues by BART. So the other distinction between the top and the bottom on the screen is the design on the top has been approved by BART. The design on the bottom still needs to be approved by BART.
Okay,
Is going to.
Hey, good morning. I can jump in on the other, the question about the muck and the fill. So, yes, I mean, it is important to maintain space both for the conduits, infrastructure, and the ventilation. So you can see where that center bottom part is remaining open, and much of that will be used for that. The side parts did have some conduits, but they were going to be fairly empty in the final configuration. So whether that actually gets filled with returning the muck or whether it has to be imported new materials, that's part of what is going to be assessed in this final study and if it proceeds to design. So like Tom said, this has been under development since March. Probably was going to be part of the configuration one way or another. So it's just something that's being accelerated now.
And we are looking at, to reuse the muck in those infill areas, it would require some treatment, some conditioning, and that's part of the study that we're undergoing right now, is what type of treatment would it require to be suitable for as use for filling those areas.
okay. I had another question about the muck itself, but we can.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I've been concerned about the spoils for quite a while, and I think it's been mentioned that there are dirt brokers, the people that, know how to sell dirt, and I'm concerned that, the contract that I've seen is we're only getting like $2 million to put this dirt on the salt ponds, but it's probably going to cost us $150 million to move that dirt, to truck it there. So can you explain how we're actively pursuing other options for disposing of this muck?
Sure. So, I mean, just starting with the salt ponds, there is additional analysis going on. We've got an environmental analysis that's being conducted at this time. As far as the other options, they are also being explored as far as buyers out there, and then also other ways of transporting it, like via train. So, work in progress at this point.
Great, thank you.
Pat and then Otto?
Thank you. So first, our slides, printouts don't have the numbers, so maybe if you can call them up from description, that we had the slide with the essentially a ring pie chart on the dollars. And Tom, you mentioned that in addition to the $700 million that we're trying to find cost savings on, there's the 500 million in Measure A that you described as wanting to keep that as a true rainy day fund for this project. But actually, I think the board's understanding is that if not used for this project, there are other Measure A projects that would be eligible. So it's really a rainy day or remainder of the Measure A dollars for a range of VTA priorities, which we tentatively said could be tapped into for this project as a kind of a last measure. And then on the slide that had the twin bore extending to the Little Portugal station, my understanding is that in addition to transitioning to the single bore at the Little Portugal, there's a possibility of extending the twin bore beyond that to somewhere between there and the downtown station, but that there are remaining really engineering issues on how you would accomplish a transition that way. But it wasn't even mentioned as one of the alternatives that's being evaluated, which concerned me because that adds, if that was feasible, that would extend the cost savings from the twin bore, which is both a direct cost savings and a time-saving cost savings.
So I'll say one thing and then let Chuck talk about some of the engineering issues. I think that's just really important feedback, that if there's benefit here, if there's ways to save money without introducing risk with what's drawn on the screen, it's worth exploring whether there's options to go further. I think we'll take that very seriously. The thinking here was you might be able to save some time and money without calling up all the risks associated with building the twin bore in the heart of downtown. I'll let Chuck or Mike talk about a couple of technical issues that we would expect to find as we go further west.
Well, and just to make sure everybody understands, what I was just describing is not to extend the twin bore to the downtown station.
Understood.
The transition underground, not disturbing above ground.
Yeah, I think so. There's two considerations that we're looking at, and it's not that it's not being studied, but there's quite a bit more that would have to be considered. Excuse me. I think Mike can talk about the actual station and what it would mean to the station. But I know one of the things we have is the Silver Creek fault zone that's just beyond the station. So not that it's a fatal flaw, but there would be additional considerations of both how you would do the twin bore tunnels, and then you probably would have at least one or two cross passages that would be mined out within that fault zone.
And to clarify, I'm not assuming that it can. I just was concerned that it wasn't on the list.
Fair enough, yeah. And then you want to just address the station.
Sure. So in this particular cost-saving idea, the single bore tunnel extends through the actual 28th Little Portugal station. And the twin bore and the single bore would flange together at what we refer to as the north ventilation shaft. So the station remains in the single bore tunnel. But if we extend the twin bore beyond the station toward the mid-tunnel vent shaft, then 28th Little Portugal becomes a cut and cover station, which drives costs up. So that's part of the assessment, is where we find that balance point.
All right, well, as long as we're going to do that evaluation as opposed to assuming it's a non-possibility. Lastly, one of the advantages, an additional advantage that may be somewhat on the margins of the new internal configuration in the single bore is that I think you mentioned less concrete. And I don't know how much less. It doesn't look like it's drastically less. But what that reminded me of is that we really aren't talking about the embodied GHGs of CO2 equivalents in our construction materials, which are grossly underappreciated in general in terms of the actual greenhouse gas impacts of a project, a major transportation project like this, whether it's high-speed rail or this, that the amount of CO2 equivalent in those construction materials in many cases exceeds the return on reduction in CO2s from switching to a clean transportation. It's not insignificant. from an environmental standpoint. And we don't have that category under considerations. And so I'm not assuming this design is going to have a drastic impact there, but it is one of the things that, for instance, when we look at how far we go with the twin bore and having considerably less concrete there, because it's thinner wall, as well as what difference there may be in the circumference of two bores versus a single. And I'd like to see that as something that we're adding to our considerations. Maybe not as high as these other factors, but it's not inconsequential. Thank you.
To Otto, Matt, Pam, and then Dev.
Thank you so much. The go straight into the tunnel interior reconfiguration. I would say I look at the diagram, but certainly cannot tell from the picture what the difference is, other than a few little lines here and there. But anyhow, my takeaway here is that one big savings, the use of less concrete. I think that's a big chunk of it. So how does that affect the structural integrity? We talk about the Silver Creek fault zone, and of course, that's one thing I'm most concerned. Are we designing this to withstand 8.0 or 9.0? As we all know, it's not a matter of if, it's better when the next big one will hit. So we have to plan for all that. So I just want to make sure we are not saving on the concrete and potentially exposing us for more risk.
Yeah, I can start. I guess to understand the two, you're right. They don't look very different. But if you imagine the top one is really precast segments of concrete. It's almost like building a segmental bridge within the tunnel. That was something that KST, as the progressive design builder, came up with as what they thought was going to be a cost and schedule saving plan of approach. And really, they were the ones that came to us earlier this year to say, by the time we've really costed this out and seeing how complex building this and every single segment would need a special seismic joint in between, it's really getting more complicated. We need to look at something else. So what this is more of a linear, either precast or cast in place approach to building this that is more efficient and will be just as robust. I mean, it will absolutely have to satisfy the track criteria for holding the loads of the BART trains and whatnot, but it's the details of what they thought was going to be more efficient construction really didn't pan out.
Well, not much more to add. That was well said, Chuck. I mean, if at its most fundamental approach, the current configuration is basically a bridge inside of the tunnel, whereas the bottom, the proposed, is more of like a box culvert inside the tunnel. So again, same means of transporting the trains, just different internal structures to do so. And the seismic considerations are one of the things that we're looking, as part of this study. The contractor KST, they've understood and developed how they would detail the seismic joints in the current configuration. And part of the proposed that's under study right now. How would you make those seismic joints work with a box culvert in the invert? So in progress.
When you mean by seismic joints, what you're saying is basically even the shakes, right? The joints would flex.
Right.
Concrete cannot flex as we all know, it just
Right.
cracks. So by flexing it, assuming that will still keep the track and the train safe inside
Correct.
while all this movement's happening, right?
Correct.
Exactly. Thank you. And then the other issue we talked about is the really exciting is having the two digging going at the same time versus just starting from one end. So certainly this would be huge time saving, I would imagine. I know we don't have any real cost estimates yet, it's TBD, but to me, in terms of order of magnitude, this got to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars of savings because of the time, right? Because we've been saying the longer it takes to build this thing, every month's delay is millions, right? So if this is the case and we could save that, so do you see that we would be able to save time on obviously, hopefully to affect opening day, right? That we could get this even shorter. Without touching that today, but having this done, isn't this one of the biggest time savings we are doing right here by doing tunneling at the same time?
I mean, I think on the slide, the twin bore tunneling slide, the construction schedule was a positive. But it is, remember, we still have single bore for 4.5 miles of the tunnel. It's only the last half mile. And yes, we believe that that tunneling could be undertaken out to the east portal and back while the single bore tunnel is coming from the west. So there would, well, we have an equal sign there. As far as as relating to impacts to revenue service state, but the tunneling portion could go a little quicker.
Yeah, I think we were just trying to be very conservative
Yeah.
with this slide. We didn't want to, because the range of feedback, everything from your feedback to Director Burt's feedback and others, we wanted to develop this a little bit more before we throw a big number on the screen and give you the wrong impression. But we do feel confident about this from a dollars and date point of view when it gets more fully developed.
Okay. And in terms of the last one regarding the reconfiguration of the new hall yard facility, you mentioned that there'll be less parking or less storage spaces. How is that going to affect our ongoing O&M? Is it going to raise that? By what order of magnitude?
Right, so that's part of the analysis that we're doing, is looking at if the reduction in storage tracks and also the maintenance facilities here, where else, what's the cost of taking it to the place where it can be done? So that is part of the analysis at this time.
Okay, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Go to Matt, Pam, Deb, and then Rosemary.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. I'll be quick because this. There we go. Appreciate the update. This is exciting progress. Couple of quick questions. I think Supervisor Lee already covered my questions on the tunnel interior reconfiguration. He talked about seismic trade-offs. I'd be interested to know if there are any others in terms of longevity of the system or maintenance or just what those trade-offs are would be helpful to understand as you dig deeper into that. First question is, assuming the board is comfortable with all of these options, do you feel confident that they collectively get us at least to that $700 million gap? Do we have enough options out on the table today, if not more than $700 million, to Pat's point?
Yes, with the qualification that these are all presented as ranges. So if we're at the upper end of the range, then yes. And the further qualification is that many of these do require BART approval as well. But if you include the numbers you see today, plus that some numbers are just expressed as TBD, the upper end definitely does get us well above 700.
Okay. I just want to make sure, my second question, which relates back to my first, is can you help us understand the timeline we're on for your deeper analysis, refining those cost savings, and then the board getting to a decision to be on track with our ultimate goal of locking in that FFGA?
Right. So our intention is to bring back to the BSV2 Oversight Committee in October and November more fully fleshed out versions of these with numbers that are more reliable, that answer many of the questions that are being asked today, and to do that in October and November so that we can hopefully come to a consensus by December.
By December?
By December,
Okay,
yes.
just want to make sure everybody's clear on what our timeline is here, because that's going to come fast. It's not a lot of meetings between now and then. Okay, based on the ranges there on the screen and the level of uncertainty we still have as you continue to, we'll learn a lot more in the coming weeks. I just want to make sure we have enough of a solution space here, enough options on the table that we're pretty confident we're going to be able to hit 700 million. What I would hate to have happen is some of these don't pan out as hoped, or the board isn't comfortable with some. I'll say for myself, I'm very comfortable with exploring all of these and think we need to. Just want to make sure we don't end up in November, find out we're not at 700 million, but then we need to get to a decision by December. So it sounds like you're okay. You feel pretty confident, Tom?
I'm confident, but I think we'll also know as the discussion continues in October, we'll know if we're looking like we're not going to hit that number. Okay. So this isn't the last time we should answer that question.
Understood. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the work, and I think full steam ahead on exploring all of these so we can really lock down what are the real savings and trade-offs. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to go to Pam.
Thank you. I actually have a follow-up timing question. Most of my questions have been asked at this point. So Tom, you're going to bring this to the task force in October, but when is the analysis going to be coming to the full board? I think this is so much information, so much detail that we need time to review it and analyze it, and getting it in December before the meeting isn't enough time for me personally and probably for the rest of us to do our analysis. So what's your plan for bringing it back to the board?
So, yeah, the last slide of the day does talk about when these meetings will take place. I think November is, early November would be the time to bring it to the full board. I also will commit to all of you that in addition to, for folks who are not on the BSV2 committee, we could certainly keep you briefed and make sure you're getting information, not just at board meetings, but in between.
Yeah, I'd like to request that the full board gets the reports from the committee.
Absolutely, and with that, I think that just makes good sense. The other thing, not to put one more meeting on everybody's plate, but one thing that Carolyn and I were discussing is that we probably need to add an additional workshop that really just goes through these kind of line by line, so that prior to it going to the full board, so we both get a briefing, people can digest it, and then be able to vote on it. So we'll be reaching out to you on an additional meeting.
Thank you. I think that will be really helpful. The scope of this is so large that we need to have as much time as possible to analyze it. And then regarding the muck and actually other issues, Monica, you mentioned that more analysis needs to be done. It would be really helpful to know what additional analysis needs to be done, what you're looking for, what kind of information you need. You did mention environmental concerns, partnerships with other organizations. Are we looking at other areas such as Lehigh, other areas that might be an area to offload the muck? And again, can we make money by offloading it and not lose money by offloading it? I hadn't even thought about that. So just in future reports, knowing what those future things are. There's a lot of TBD items here, and frankly, a lot of this, I've tried to understand it. But I'm looking at the twin bore and the single bore configurations, and I appreciate that we're looking at that, and I think all of these things should be examined. But when I think about the twin bore and the single bore, we've already ordered the equipment on the single bore, right? So is there additional cost for the twin bore added on top? And hopefully that's part of the analysis as well. So in the net, is there a net cost savings, and what is the total net cost savings? With that, I'm finished. Thank you, Chair.
That was helpful. Thanks, Pam. Deb, and then Rosemary.
Thank you, and I'll actually just pick up where Pam left off, because that was my question about the cost savings. The numbers that we have so far, are those net of additional engineering and design costs and all of that? Or are we talking about cost savings, but we don't know additional costs to do the thing yet?
Correct. So they are included, design, whether we're having to acquire another tunnel boring machine or real estate, all of that. Based upon the limited information we have right now, it's included. And then as we continue with further refinement, then we'll be able to refine that portion of the cost too. So what you're seeing here is the end result of the cost savings with all those other things taken out of it.
Okay, does that also include lowering contingency as we lower the dollar amounts, or do we not want to do that because these are still large, there are large unknowns?
So ultimately, all of these cost savings go into our cost workbook. And that cost workbook has the contingencies, the allocated, unallocated. So that will get refined also as we put these into that cost workbook.
Okay, so it doesn't include that right now?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So when I do the math on the numbers that we were given so far, the low end is 300, so we're not even quite halfway there. And then the higher end is 560. And there are the two TBDs are the muck and the tunneling. You had talked to me about a possible number for the tunneling earlier this week, Tom, and I'm wondering why that didn't make it into the presentation. What do you know now that you didn't know a few days ago?
Well, I've said to a couple of you that the tunneling could get us, I think I said up to 100 million in some of our conversations. That has not been, that number does not have the level of analysis behind it that even the ranges you see for the tunnel interior and the yard yet. So I thought it was prudent to say TBD rather than to raise the
Okay.
expectation.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of when we're talking about construction logistics being more difficult to do something, that adds to the cost, right? But we don't have numbers for those?
That would-
So I'm just curious, when we get to a number for the tunneling, will that include the additional construction logistics costs?
I think if we're able to capture it, it would. And I just say that cautiously because we'd have to see, based upon the design refinement, based upon what we're doing right now, can we capture that type of aspect of it? So ideally, it would be good, but just not sure if we can capture it all at this point in time.
Okay, so then we would have more contingency for that, for those.
Potentially.
These kind of
Yeah,
monuments then.
potentially. Just trying to think of specifics here, and that's where I'm thinking we'd have to look at it more closely to see what we could do, whether it's a capital cost that we capture here or it's something like you're saying in the contingency.
So when we get to December for a vote for this, will we be able to see this in a more detailed way, not just, I like the criteria that you have here, but we don't have numbers for construction schedule. We don't have numbers for O&M. We don't have numbers for construction logistics. Are we going to have those by then? I mean, we're talking about, are we going to have them by the BSV committee, October, November, by the special meeting? When are we going to have these numbers? I know we have to vote to go before we really know everything. That's kind of the nature of these really large, complex projects, but how much will we know and when?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying our best, like I said, eat, drink, sleep, everything about cost savings. So we're trying our best to gather this information as quickly as possible. Part of it is just we have to either advance the design. We've got some agreements that we need to work on with BART to make sure we're on the same page. And then we can focus on the schedule, the implications of the schedule, the costs that are associated with it. So we are running as fast as we can to get all of that information for you.
And I think just to I think the core question, Director, we would have a table with numbers, not just pluses and minuses, for as many of these assessment factors and much tighter ranges of cost savings before we brought this for a vote in December. And we'll use the BSV committee to keep you updated on how that range is narrowing and how that table is being filled out over the course of the fall.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question, because I don't see it in here, these are all sort of hard cost type things. They are the actual project, but there's so much project support and contractors that are on this project. What are we looking at in terms of cost savings for or risk sharing for our contracts? Because I know our contracts are not for the length of the project right now. We haven't worked all of those out, and so what are we looking at in terms of our contractors?
I'll start with that. I won't make the contractors answer that one. So
Please take less money so we can do this project.
Oh, thank you for saying that. So for all these savings, we're trying to give a capital cost estimate and an O&M cost estimate. As Monica said, the estimates as they get closer will be net of the design cost. So that's one. So the design cost, there's the management cost, and the construction cost. I don't think we're going to know too much about the specific way the contract would be set up, like how risk pools would be different for a different configuration of the yard, to be honest, by December. But it is something that we're working with KST on exactly what scope they're going to do right now. For the professional services, we will be giving an update on the professional services spending rates at the October VSV committee. We've bent the curve on that significantly, and we're between 40 and 50% cost reductions in the spending just since August. I'll give details about that at the BSV committee, but I think that covers the management and design side of it. The construction costs, honestly, depend on the contract structure, and that's not really part of this analysis yet.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's in everyone's interest for this project to go forward, and so that includes everyone who's working on this project that we're paying.
Yeah.
So it's worth having those conversations.
So I'm going to go to Rosemary, and Sergio's going to have our last word. And the reason colleagues, I'm sorry, I want to wrap us up because we still have a separate section just on this topic, and I think it'll give people a chance to ask any questions they didn't on this first part. Go ahead, Rosemary.
So the good news is that my colleague, Councilmember Davis, has asked all my questions, so let's going to move on.
Go ahead, Sergio. No, please, go ahead. I'm really not trying to rush folks. I just want to make sure that we can get to the second and third.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I have a couple of overall questions. First one being BART. How does the kind of changes that we're talking about? I'm overall for everything that we're going to hear today. How much of that, if any, can be done within the scope of current agreements? And how much of that, obviously, broadly speaking, would rise to the level of needing new board approval? And how does that inform or impact the timelines that you're talking about?
Yeah, so we're going to answer this in two pieces because there's the requirements agreements within the project, and then there's, I think, the second question you asked about the board. I think it does depend on where this ends up, but as long as we stay within those guardrails I talked about in the beginning in terms of our CEQA and NEPA, I don't think these would rise to board approval issues with BART. But there are important BART sign-offs that Monica could talk about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, most of those, the coordination efforts that we're doing with BART at this point in time, the ones that are probably that rise to the top, the yard, that one is a sensitive one, and so we're approaching that delicately with BART to work with them on that. Sensitive because it is something that they have said they're definitely interested in, and so we're working with them to see, can we achieve that balance, right, of trying to do the cost savings, but also what BART needs are. So we've already started that discussion with them. As far as like the criteria, we've got the process for asking for variance with them. So again, that's more at a staff level, day to day, that we're working with them. That has been already part of the project. So there's a process established for that. So like Tom is saying, trying to work within the established agreement, and then basically working within that point.
Great. Thank you. And one of those guardrails is risk, and that's something that's come up in a few of the answers. So I just want to know, overall, how are you thinking about that as part of your analysis? And will that analysis be part of what we see as this moves forward before the board?
Yeah, I mean, risk is something that we think about and meet on a regular basis. We've got our risk register, so we're constantly thinking about forward thinking, and then also what is happening day to day with it too. So that is part of our conversation where we're trying to capture that also within our matrix.
And will the board see some of that as we move forward with considering these options?
Yeah, we'll definitely bring that back and identify what we see as potential positive and negative, risks that come about with these cost saving ideas.
All right, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that we go ahead and move to the next section.
Great, thanks. My name is Greg Tebow. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our station options. So there's a little bit of a different criteria. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you very much, board, for being here. There's a few different criteria items that we want to talk about. Some are the hard costs, and some are the soft costs associated with station experience, right? So those are the tough ones to really analyze in terms of numbers. But we've got some of those things up on the board here. The access and orientation, the station presence, and the passenger experience. So some of these things have our initial assessments of whether they're plus, minus, or equal. Some people can agree with them, some people can discuss them a little bit further. So we're definitely open to talk about that, but I'll walk through some of the various alternatives that we've got for some of the stations. Again, we'll start with parking. One of the biggest ones is the 28th Street parking garage, so that's first on our list. Then we'll get into the station concepts for each of the 3 underground stations, and then we'll end with the Santa Clara station. The majority of the 3 options we're talking about, the stations, is to try to consolidate the overall station footprint, try to make that head house, that entryway, as you enter and exit that station, a little bit smaller, a little bit less complex, a little bit more efficient. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the underground connection of those stations from that surface level entrance down to the tunnel. So there's kind of this large diameter shaft that goes down from the station entrance down to that tunnel. We're looking at a couple different configurations of how to make that more efficient. When we go with a smaller diameter shaft, you're not able to get as many escalator runs in. So now we've got some options to look at some of those different configurations. So those are the trade-offs that we've got here, and those do affect passenger experience. They do affect the overall operations maintenance of the station. So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. The first one on the list here is the 28th Street parking garage. We do have currently about a 7-story parking garage, which would house 800 stalls. We've got 400 at grade. That's the current scenario. What we think we can do is actually convert all of those parking garage stalls to surface parking. This would still provide the environmental commitment of 1,200 parking spots on opening day. And that parking garage could be built in the future, and it could also be integrated into the transit-oriented development that would happen throughout the entire site. So this would be kind of the concept of the build-out of that site after that station plaza is constructed. A lot of those parking stalls could be integrated directly into those developments. The next option at 28th Street would also be to consolidate, as I said, the station head house itself. So the current roof line is 1 diameter. We would try to bring it down a little bit smaller. I know working with the community working group and the design review committee, the thought of a circular station is really what the community wants. So we're going to keep that circular configuration as much as possible, but we just want to reduce the overall diameter of that footprint a little bit. Staying on 28th Street, as I mentioned earlier, this does have a concept to reduce the diameter of that shaft that goes down to the tunnel itself. When we do reduce the diameter of the shaft, we would need to introduce an additional escalator switchback. So this is a complex situation where we've already reduced the head house itself, and then we add that additional escalator switchback. We do have elevators; those do remain. We do have staircases as well, so the passenger experience is affected just by that one additional escalator run. This saves us in the $15 to $30 million range. We're also going to try to make the station finishes a little bit more effective and a little less expensive. And the last option we've got at 28th Street is, instead of going with a circular shaft to get us down to that tunnel level, we would go with a rectangular configuration. The cost of this is still TBD because a rectangular excavation is a little bit more expensive than that circular one. But this does allow for a 2 escalator run, and I know that was one of the criteria that we kind of tried to keep with this option. So people can get down in 2 escalators and not have to go to 3. So this is a concept that is still being worked on at this point. We would still go with the circular head house configuration and station option, and it would be a little bit reduced from where it is currently. So these are our current options for 28th Street. I also wanted to remind the board of the referral that was issued several months ago to integrate a lot of these elements below grade. When we do that, that does drive up cost. So I wanted to remind folks that if we do some of these station savings and we still want to try to bring things below grade, that introduces some cost as well. So we have kind of a plus and minus, a balance that we really have to work through. Some of these options were able to move a lot of these station infrastructure facilities, the mechanical and the electrical, over to that north vent shaft. So I think we mentioned that earlier, that north vent shaft. We can try to put as much mechanical and electrical over to there, but we do need to have some of that equipment near the station primary head house. Okay, the next candidate is the downtown configuration. Currently, we've got a fairly large, tall structure with a kind of a complex roof line. This is something we've worked on over the last year or so. The proposal would be to reduce the height of that roof, maybe narrow it up a bit, also work on a little bit of a efficiency related to the materials selected. Go with a little bit less expensive materials, and that would be the proposed configuration here. The cost savings is in the $15 to $25 million range. The next option would be for a rectangular configuration downtown. This would allow for a smaller station footprint, but allows for a north-south connection from Santa Clara Street to the Paseo and to the plaza behind the station. This is about a 40 to 50 foot wide Paseo that could be populated with landscaping and station furniture and plaza furniture style elements. This puts the fare gates in a north-south configuration. They do not empty directly onto Santa Clara. And this is just one option. It's a concept at this point. This does keep 4 escalators, 2 up, 2 down, and those are bi-directional. So if there's an event, we can go 3 up and 1 down, or vice versa. But this is one concept to go with a rectangular shaft instead of a circular shaft. It also mitigates a little bit of the impact we have to some of that historic building that's out there adjacent to the project site. So right now we've got the $15 to $25 million roof savings, and we're still working on these rectangular shaft configuration updates. Okay, the next candidate is the Diridon roof line adjustment. Again, this kind of right now we currently have kind of a dual roof approach at Diridon. What we would do is have a singular roof. It would be a lot more efficient. We've been able to screen that roof and make it house some mechanical equipment up on top potentially. But the current roof line is kind of a double roof, and also we had intended on a future potential rooftop garden, we would eliminate the loading for that so that our overall roof structure gets a lot thinner. So that's essentially the concept here. And then the next step is the same thing related to the switchback of escalators. We would go with a smaller diameter shaft, which gets us down to the tunnel. That would introduce 1 additional escalator run. The last option is a rectangular configuration at Diridon. We are showing 1 long escalator run. The fare gates are shown in that position. They could be moved. We could also put in a second escalator switchback. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 1 long escalator. It could actually switch back and go up to that station infrastructure area. I do want to note for all of the Diridon configurations, the footprint of the station itself, so in plan view, would still be the same. We would still have essentially a full build out of the Diridon station from Montgomery to Cahill. The only proposal we're talking about here is to change the roof line and then also the actual shaft that goes down to the tunnel. Just to reiterate, if we do go with the station infrastructure facilities below grade here, that does introduce some additional cost. The last candidate we have is at Santa Clara. We diligently worked with the community there and came up with an architecturally pleasing design. We think we can maintain that same configuration, that same architectural layout. We would just have a little bit of a smaller footprint of that roof line. So we want to maintain all the things we worked so hard with the design review committee on, but we just have a smaller footprint of that station head house a bit. So I think those are the candidates we've got for the stations. I realize these are a little bit smaller in magnitude, but they are definitely impactful, especially since everyone sees the station. They walk through the station. They don't necessarily see what's underneath the trackway or whether they're in 2 tunnels or 1. So these are the complex ones that we need to talk about and understand where the community is and where the board is on these. Thank you.
So much, and I'm going to go to, just for the public, we're going to hear from my colleagues, and then we'll go to the public, and mostly because I'd started already that way, so I know Harry's here waiting. So I'm going to start with Dev, and then I see Suds and Pam. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind of the breakouts and the options for the stations. I just don't, I'm not sure I completely remember our board referrals for the increased cost for 28th Street and for Diridon. So if you could remind me what those are?
I'll summarize them. I think the most important things were related to moving station facilities that are not public facing, like vent rooms for escalators and battery rooms and things like that, below grade. Number one.
And is that for both stations that you're talking about?
It applies to all the San Jose
Okay,
stations.
so this is below grade.
Yep. And then the second thing had to do with exploring a direct tunnel underground connection between the Diridon BART station and the Diridon integrated station. That's not covered here. That's something that would be, we would create the ability to build that in the future when the Diridon station concept is complete. We don't talk about that here.
Okay, so that's not, just the below grade facilities are for the increased cost for board referrals on both the 28th Street and the Diridon, is that correct?
They're going to have a ton.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then in terms of the differences between the circular shaft or the rectangular shaft, we had talked a little bit, Tom, about the Diridon one a few days ago, and about how it would change the entrance point for folks. In thinking about that, there are some potential benefits and changes to the street level infrastructure. I think that we would need to explore more to really make that decision, because the possibility, I think you had said that the rectangular station shaft would be farther away from Santa Clara from the street, and you and I had talked about potentially a cutout for where Lyft and Uber and also just drop-offs could happen, and pickups as a possible advantage to this new configuration. So I just wanted to put that out there for the rest of the board, so that we can really, it's hard to make these recommendations now to say stay with the circular shaft or go to the rectangular shaft when we don't know kind of what the downstream impacts are from the visuals. And I understand this is all like rough cut stuff, but I think we're going to need some more detail on what that looks like from the passenger experience, as opposed to just saying it's a negative passenger experience. Is there increased travel time? Is there something else we can do that won't add a lot of cost on the street level infrastructure that will make it a better experience? It could be a net positive or just neutral. So I think we need to kind of refine a little bit more. That being said, I know there's a historical building on Santa Clara Street when we're talking about the downtown station, but the current use of that historical building is not something that the average member of the public is going to on a regular basis, and there's no paseo behind that area right now. I don't know that we would want there to be. So in that particular station, I tend to think that keeping the entrance on Santa Clara makes the most sense. So those are all
Now
my
you've
comments.
intrigued me. Okay. We're going to go to Suds, Pam, Omar, Matt, and Sergio.
Yeah, so regards to parking, you know, we're talking about opening in 13 years. We really have no idea what cars are going to be like. We're going to have autonomous vehicles, Waymos coming, all of that stuff. So I don't like the idea of investing hundreds of millions of dollars in parking structures, but you can build a parking structure in 2 years. So I like the idea of doing stacked surface parking. You know, we can pay operators, it's jobs for people, but it allows us to provide the parking at surface level. And then if we don't need them, we can do TOD there, right? I don't want, we need to plan for it in our plans and such, but I don't like to build parking. The other thing about it is I went to the CWG meeting and there were CWG members there and they roundly rejected the architectural changes to these stations. They want to see iconic stations, especially Diridon. When we go to, you know, the big stations, Union Station in Washington, D.C., and Grand Central and Penn Station, they're, you know, we're not the scale of those cities, but the idea is that we're going to have to live with these stations for 100 years, and they should look iconic, and they also should provide meeting spaces. I like the idea of having kiosks in there, coffee kiosks. So if you're going to go meet somebody who's getting off the train and you're waiting there, maybe you can get something to eat or a coffee. But by reducing the size of these, we're really restricting the meeting, the open meeting spaces that people want to congregate in. So while it's cost savings and we need to look at cost savings, we should find them somewhere else.
Thank you, Suds. Pam?
Suds, you pretty much stole what I was going to talk about. I appreciate the cost savings on design, but that isn't where we should be saving money at this point. As Suds mentioned, these should be iconic buildings. They're in downtown. They're at Diridon Station. They look really boxy and boring, and we will, trust me, take a ton of heat from our community by allowing constructions of buildings in the downtown area that are not iconic. We need to, these should be showpieces. And I don't mean that we need to spend money beyond our dollars, but to cut expenses here in the design of those two buildings, I just can't support. Certainly in the design that's shown here, the real boxy approach. That wasn't my main concern, but when I saw those pictures, it sort of was a red flag, and Omar's probably going to echo some of the similar things, because that's his area, and he represents that. I'm sure. I did have a question, though, and I agree with not building parking structures. In the city of San Jose, we don't even have parking requirements anymore for development. So the less parking we build, the better it is, because really we don't want people to get in their cars and drive over there. We want them to take other modes of transportation to get there and get out of their vehicles. So parking structures, we can always build later, but I'm completely supportive of the ground level or the surface parking. I do have a question about the reduced station shafts going from one switchback to two switchbacks. And I assume this isn't going to change access for the elevator, so I'm concerned about ADA compliance and ADA access, and thinking about people who may not want to use the elevator, but can use the escalator, and how difficult is that for them to use 2 switchbacks instead of 1? So I just want to put that out there on your radar, that always be thinking about accessibility, and I think how difficult it might be to go to the 2 switchbacks. So those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to Omar, Matt, and then Sergio, and then Pat.
Hello, good morning, and I apologize for being late. I was with a bunch of rambunctious fourth graders early in the morning, and
Isn't that awesome?
well, this is important too, but but so is hanging out with fourth graders. So I don't know. I was a little bit late, so I'm not sure if this question has been asked, but we have not exhausted, and I know the atmosphere in the federal level is crazy right now, and we won't know what's going to happen in the next 46 days. Have we exhausted our ability to get federal funding for the 700 million shortfall?
I'll take that, Carolyn, and you know.
I'll
take that question.
It's all good. Exhausted.
Yeah. So one of the when we found out on August 1st that the FTA was committing to a maximum of $5.1 billion, that means that's the maximum contribution we can get from the FTA. Now there are other federal sources, but almost all the money for projects like this does come from the FTA. So the main federal funding sources are capped at 5.1. We are exploring with our state partners whether there's some state money available as well. That is another way to close the gap. And this has been conversations about cost savings, but we are working on potentially bringing in some other revenues that are neither from the county nor from the federal government.
Okay, so that's a maybe.
Yes.
It's a maybe. Okay, and because I haven't had a chance, I really do want to thank Supervisor Chavez and Mayor Mahan for really rattling cages and getting us that $5.1 billion. I think this is a super important project for our local economy and the city of San Jose, because we've been waiting for it for over 30 years. So seeing that it's just very unfortunate that these cost-cutting measures or ideas are coming at the cost of our riders and, quite frankly, our community, who deserve iconic stations. We waited for too long, and so, you know, I came in very joyful because I was with a bunch of fourth graders, but these slides are making me not joyful at all, especially when I see that just to cut a few $1 million, we no longer want folks to enter or exit from East Santa Clara Street. That is the most important gateway in the city of San Jose. Sorry, all of you who represent other districts, but we want folks to come in and out of East Santa Clara Street. So seeing that the proposed entry is not going to be coming through from a paseo, that Councilmember Davis is correct. It's an ugly parking lot, and who knows what's going to be there when this station opens up, right? We want our riders, we want our community to come out and see how beautiful East Santa Clara Street is. And again, of course, surface parking lots are so 1950s, you know. And so are parking structures. So thank you, Vice Mayor Kamei. So are parking structures. It's you know, it's just very unfortunate that this is all coming at a cost of our riders and our community. But you know, I hope that we're able to actually find that $700 million, so we don't have to be sitting here and say, oh, you know, if we do this differently, by changing this elevator, it's going to help us cut, you know, $15 million, you know, or by by making a mediocre station, it's going to save us millions of dollars. So, but anyways, that's my 2 cents. So, thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Matt, and then we're going to go to Lynette, then Sergio, and then Pat.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. I'll try to be brief here.
Mayor, I don't think your mic's on.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to press it there.
Need that second coffee. Thanks, Chair. I'll try to be brief here. Echoing Suds, I think of all the trade-offs we may need to make, I think deferring the parking or going to surface parking makes a lot of sense. That, to me, feels like a no-brainer, and we can figure out later if we need to invest more there. And there may be other ways to work the economics of that. I will say personally, given the magnitude of these, I would say in the stack ranking of all the things we can do, I would put any compromising of station aesthetics and customer experience at the bottom of the list. I do think how people feel when they come on site and potentially use this every day as a commuter, it just really matters. And so I think to maybe repeat what Deb started with, getting deeper into what this really would mean from a customer experience and aesthetic standpoint is important. I don't know if we can get higher fidelity renderings, and I'm not totally philosophically opposed to any back of house being above ground. I get that we may need to do that. And look, at the end of the day, I want a project more than a nicely designed thing that doesn't get built. So we may have to make some tough trade-offs, but I would really caution us against making penny-wise, pound-foolish changes here around things like customer experience and aesthetics. Obviously, they need to be on the table. We need to understand them in higher fidelity to know if those are, to get a good sense from the community and of course, ultimately the board on whether or not they're the right trade-offs to make. Personally, I care less about circular versus rectangular. I think it's about things like building materials, landscaping, how many escalator switches am I making? How does it feel as I walk through and use and come out of these stations? So that's kind of more what I'm looking at. And then I still am very focused on above ground, because once we build these stations, we need as much interest and investment in the area or the urban environment around them. And if they have big blocky things that aren't activated, that's going to be a problem. So again, I think I'd rather pay the extra 15 million, find a way to pay for it to get it below ground, than have a stretch of your walk out of the station or into the station feel kind of dead. So those are the kinds of things that are still on my mind. But until we get a little more detail about exactly how this is going to look and feel, it's hard to know what the right trade-offs are there. But on parking, yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. We absolutely should do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Lynette?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So clarifying on the point that the mayor made. So we're maintaining the circular building because that was what the community wanted, but we're lowering the roof line for cost savings. But if it went to become a rectangular building, are we compromising the downtown, the aesthetics of the downtown and Diridon, and then putting all the aesthetic look and feel into the 28th building? Or how do we make sure that we can assure that all the other buildings will have the look and feel that their communities want as well, looking to obtain that iconic look and feel that this one might be getting? So help us understand that. Thank you.
I think maybe the answer to a lot of the aesthetic questions is, if we really want to move these things forward, and the feedback today and the feedback from the community maybe answers that question for us. But if we do propose to bring these things forward, I think we need to bring you higher quality renderings and images so you really have a sense of what the aesthetic trade-offs are. So
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Tom. Lynette, did that respond to your question? I'm going to go to.
For a while now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see it. You have to wave at me, Carmen. Go ahead, Carmen. And then Otto too? Okay, Carmen.
Thank you, Chair. So my concern is the Diridon candidate, the minimized circular station shaft. The population is going to grow, and it just seems the people will be kind of squeezed in. I would like to keep it as it is, as the current diameter shaft, 128 feet. And also, relating back to Pam and Sud's comments about making sure it's attractive and not box-like. I think because you're trying to make it a destination place where people, like big cities, make it iconic. I think that's really important. Even though, even though it's your city, San Jose, however, you need to make it a destination place, make it iconic. So I think that, like you mentioned, it's too boxy. I don't think people are gonna, you want to showcase your city. That's, to me, that's important. People will come. That's it, thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. Otto?
Yes, so my personal preference, even though I don't have any fear of height, I actually really like the fact that we have more stretched back, because when I was in DC looking at the metro, some of the stations, like you're looking down 40, 50 feet is scary, frankly.
Scary.
And I think all of us have seen those, so the fact that it's always pushed back, I think it's a good thing. That, to me, is an improvement. And I just want to mention, in terms of the aesthetics and whatnot, I've always been saying this. If you go to the major cities, not even Washington D.C., you go to Metro, the D.C. Union Station, right? It's not just a station. It's a place you go shop. There's a place you go eat. There's a place you meet friends, and you sometimes just go there to meet and not take the train at all. And I think there's some thinking that we need to think of being, having worked and practically lived on First and Santa Clara for 20 years in the old B of A building. I know that neighborhood very well, and that significantly needs a lot more retail excitement. And I think besides just the look of it, I mean, that's important, but I think really is having the ability to bring in these type of retail, restaurants, and those activities, I actually think can bring some private funding coming to this project. So we need money, but besides what keep trying to shave it, is trying to create opportunity that there might be some private funding that could come in to want to use those space for those exciting things, and that'll bring people to the station, to downtown, and I see Matt is very excited about that, certainly. So, yeah, just wanted my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergio?
So I can agree more with what Suds, Pam, and Matt were saying, so I won't repeat that in terms of the customer experience. I just wanted to add 2 pieces. One of them is a request. I think it would be helpful when we go back to the board to break out the numbers a little bit, because there may be things within the scope of some of these ideas that don't actually end up impacting significantly the customer experience. And so it would help to piece that out from the things that we're talking about that will be visible and noticeable. And it's just more difficult to do when you have range. The other thing is, again, just in agreement with what was said, but just to add another experience. I think ideally, if we do everything right, this will be an opportunity not just to serve existing riders, but to grow our ridership in a way that we can't do now. And so I think that's part of why you get such strong feelings with things like this about the customer experience, about the aesthetics, because we actually want to draw in people who may not be using the system now. We want to draw in people who may pass through, and then they have a great experience and they become regular transit riders. So we should really be thinking of this as an opportunity to strengthen our whole system and put our best foot forward. And so for me, it's not just about aesthetics, but it's actually about building out the kind of system and ridership that we want and that we need for the future. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Pat, and then we'll go to the public, and then I'm going to just give some next steps that I heard all of you that I think I caught. All right, Pat.
Yeah, so first I want to follow on Sergio's comments that were moving in the direction that I wanted to talk about. On the customer experience, there are all these qualitative factors that people have been talking about, but we face a challenge in actually meeting our ridership projections, and the customer experience will influence that ability, and that's an ongoing expense to this organization if we don't meet them. So that's a consideration. And then I want to follow on to one of Matt's points, which is talking about out of what we've identified so far on even the upper end of the cost savings, what's the aggregate number? When we discussed this at the committee, if I recall correctly, it was $550 million. And there's no slide here that summarizes that. Did we get up to $700 million in the aggregate of what we've identified? Because that's not before us.
We did, but it's because there's a lot of TBD numbers here. So I think our intention as soon as the next BSV committee meeting is to bring tighter and numbers that you can see in a table that adds up.
And if we've only got up to about 700 million, we only get that if we hit the upper end of everything we've identified, including things that influence customer experience. So I just want to lay that on the table. That's
Yeah,
the
no,
challenge.
I think, Pat, I think that's fair, that we have to be really honest, that we're in between a rock and a hard place. I also just want to say what's not included today is the efforts we're making to get more money.
Absolutely.
And so I just want to be clear that both bodies of information should be presented concurrently at the next meeting.
That's right. So there's a cost savings and whatever potential
Right.
other funds. And together, those have to at least get to the 700 million, if not more. Okay. And within that context, we're really talking about trade-offs here. When we're talking about customers' experience and the importance of that, in the end, we have to make this work as a project or we don't have a project. And that's the dilemma we're facing.
And I think just to say this aloud, that is part of the challenge we have with meeting the FGA timeline, because the project that's being considered by the federal government for that $5.1 billion is largely the project in front of us.
Yeah.
So we're working, and I just want to reinforce what the staff was saying about working within these guardrails. So I think as this gets presented next time, that the guardrails need to be part of the evaluative framework that gets presented so that the board understands where there's a risk.
Lastly, the other effort that's going on in trying to identify any other opportunities we have for cost reductions are the authorization that the board had given a month ago for our Auditor General to engage with Gall-Ziedler Consultants, or GZ, as the independent domain experts there. We have Mr. Masri Munfa here. The full board, I don't think, has met Nasri. Would it be fine if he came forward, just brief introduction?
Absolutely. If you could go to the podium there would be great.
Yep.
The staff will help.
And then
And then Nasri, I'm going to ask you to be brief, and Pat, you're going to wrap up because I want to go to the public.
Yep.
And we have one
And-
more item.
just so that you understand his background and their company, GZ is consultants in this arena. Nasri himself has had a career as a senior vice president on tunneling for AECOM, WSP, HNTB, and Parsons Brinkerhoff. So we're really fortunate to have someone with this depth of tunneling expertise. We really don't have that many people in the country with us. Well,
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, everybody. I would appreciate if you can give my wife a call and tell her what you said about me. Well, I'm Nasri Munfa. As Pat mentioned, I've been 40 years into business. I've led several major companies' tunneling practices before. Recently, last 3 years, I became a partner and principal of a specialty company firm, which is called Gall-Ziedler. It is an international firm located. We have offices in the U.S., Canada, U.K., Austria, and India. Our role on this project, we were just retained through MGO as supporting to the project team and to support the BSV committee to provide oversight on three major elements, actually two major elements. One is the studies and evaluation of the single versus twin bore. The other one, the cost-saving ideas. Many of these are great ideas, but they could be additional ideas that we will look into it. And the third role is to be a subject matter expert. I personally bring to the project my experience in major international projects, including the 57-foot diameter TBM tunnel in Seattle, which was opened up about, 3 years ago or so. The 42-foot diameter tunnel, Port of Miami, tunnel and 42-foot diameter tunnel under the Bosphorus in Istanbul, which is subject to about 350 feet of water pressure on that. So I bring you the technical side, and I will be able to help you or help Tom and his staff to identify potential cost-saving ideas and be able to bridge a gap. Thank you very much for trusting us and trusting me, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to just reinforce that this support will be particularly helpful to the subcommittee. So we'll have some additional opportunities and firepower to get really focused. So thank you. And thanks for being here today. All right, I'm going to now go to public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to speak? But I'm going to start with Harry, Neil, and then I don't know if there's anybody online that would like to speak.
We have one hand raised online.
Great. So we'll give each speaker 2 minutes, and then I'm going to come back for some next steps.
All right. Good morning. Thank you for your presentation, staff. I would like to echo some of the comments that we heard from the board members regarding parking. I live very close to Milpitas BART station. That's my local one. And I find that the lot and garage are both empty almost at all times. They're incredibly overbuilt. We should be prioritizing station area and land use over parking. Similar to what was noted on the eastern side of the project, it may be worth considering twin bore or even perhaps cut and cover in some places once we get outside of downtown San Jose. That may be a way that the disruption there at the surface might be more amenable to the surrounding community and could potentially save a good amount of money. Could be worth considering. I would also like to note, please do prioritize in cost savings. Good station access is extremely, extremely important. Once it's built, nobody's going to care if it's single bore or twin bore. Everybody will care if the station is easy to access. That needs to be at in the forefront of our perspective at all times. I would also say rectangular shafts I think are a good idea. The 28th Street diagram that was shown has a little middle level. That could be used potentially for activations, could be used for in-station retail. That is important for long-term funding. That's done in a lot of stations outside of the country. Aesthetics are also very important. I would echo those comments. You'll note right here, there's a picture of Moscow subway station. Some of the most beautiful stations in the world are in that system. I would like to see us compete with that. And also, Salesforce Transit Center sold their naming rights for $110 million. Could be something to look into for cost savings. Thank you.
Thanks. We have nobody else here in the room, so we'll go to online. Thanks, Puneet.
Thank you, Chair. Gerald, please accept the unmute and begin speaking whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I just want to point out some things that may come out of left field, but...
Gerald, could you please speak up, please? We can hear you, but your voice is very soft.
Sorry, how's that? It's probably better. Is that okay?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. Measure B is being talked about as a possible source of funding, and that's $502 million. But there's obviously some constraint about that. People are showing less than total positivity about that possibility. I would suspect that there might be a lot of pushback. If that happens, then you're not looking at 700 million, you're looking at 1.2 billion, which could go up higher if the prices go up as you get into construction. I had quite a bit of involvement with the Central Subway in San Francisco, not as a professional working, but we were very much following the project. And it was very similar to this. The situation you're in now is exactly what they had. The feds came in, they said, we don't like your price of 1.2 billion, so we want to increase it to 1.575 billion, I think it was, but that'll be the limit. And so then the Then the people in San Francisco had to start scrambling to figure out how to cut costs. And they made some mistakes they're suffering from today. And if you're interested, I could send you those, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to leave it out now. Now, except to say they're down to 3,000 riders a day, which is far less than they expected. One last quick thing, the $5.1 billion plus the money that's already committed to that project would give you enough to actually completely finish the twin bore option with money left over to help with building the Dearborn Station, assuming the feds would play ball with that. So I think you're in a real squeeze, and some of the ideas I heard are good today, and some of them sound very, very risky for fear of making things worse, not better. I'm out of time, but thank you for listening. Thank you.
And there are no more hands raised.
Thank you. Thanks, Puneet. So I'm gonna just wrap up this section, and I want to start with an overall comment to my colleagues. One is that I do think it has been part of our process. I know it has been to try to refine costs. None of the presentations that people are making today do they want to make, because people are in love with the project too. So they're not trying to make our lives ugly, although we need to stay away from the stations. That said, I just want to talk a little bit about some next steps that I heard from everybody. One, we're going to add an additional workshop before any final votes are brought to the board. Two, that all materials that are being sent to the Policy Advisory Board that's working, the BART Phase 2 Working Committee, I never remember the name of it, I know I'm not supposed to call it ad hoc, but anyway, that group, you will all get materials in advance at the time we do, with the reminder of when the meeting's on, because you can listen to it live or listen to it at a later point in time. Second is, I want to make sure that all members of the community working group are alerted. I know we do this, but formally alerted to these meetings, along with them getting materials from them. Now, I'll just say to my colleagues that we're trying to have the community working group meetings before these meetings, so, but just so that everybody's on the same page, but also that all of you get invited to every community working group, because if there's one happening on a night you could go, you might want to do that. Fourth, that the materials for consideration as we move forward, I'm going to recommend that we have a clear and consistent matrix so that the board understands what the trade-offs are and what are the key indices that you're using to assess the recommendations you're making. I do want to say that on all of our work, the customer experience actually should be number one, and the cost savings and the elements of those cost savings as number two, with the breakouts as requested by Vice Chair Lopez. And the addition of an environmental box that may be a little inconsistent because we haven't been measuring that way, but just an indicator if we think there's both a positive or a risk, I think would be of value. And then I just want to emphasize, colleagues, that the guardrails that we have to be considering relative to the FGA process need to be directly embedded so that you're looking at the trade-offs relative to the guardrails that are being considered. That makes sense to everyone? To the staff? Okay. And then I do want to emphasize that it is important for the board to understand the cost of the contracts that we're expending. And colleagues, let me just say, by the time we get these, on occasion, our materials have been very low, and we don't get the contracts. We get pieces of them, and I still think we should consistently get the contracts. But what I want to make sure the board understands is that the type of contract and the way the contractor is being paid. Because in some instances, if we're paying for services, like we're paying, and it's costing a contractor X amount to conduct that body of work, there is an agreed upon rate of return that contractor is getting, and that really needs to be understood by the board. And the other reason is this, and I'm more saying this to all of you, is that it would be wonderful to build something without having the afterwards the lawsuit component of the building process. Like, I feel like the process should be on a continuum that includes lawsuits at the end, where whatever money's left in the pot, everybody's trying to grab at it. I think one way to make sure that that is less, happens less is, one, we make sure we have good mediation processes, but the other is to look at how we're incenting the contracts, and you all should understand how those contracts are being incented. And I just want to give one example. If we, on occasion, and I'll use the county as an example, when we actually did this is so bad, I'm even embarrassed to say it, except we don't do it anymore, so, okay. But we were going out for, we had a third party helping us negotiate contracts with our healthcare providers. The percentage, the way we paid them was on the percentage of the overall contract cost. Like, what? Anyway, we don't do that anymore, but that's what I mean. I just think you all need to understand incentives, and so that our partners are protected and we're protected in terms of how we're thinking about that. So before we take any final votes on contracts, I want to make sure it is crystal clear, go to the freezer, get the box, that simple. You have to be a certain age to know what that meant. Okay, and then last, the slide about revenues. You know, colleagues, one of the things that I find I still can't kind of get over the anger of this, is that the amount of money we're putting in locally from our own voters, and looking at projects across the country that are getting much higher percentages of their projects paid for either by the state or by the federal government, and us, you know, we're just coming with all of our pennies and saying, you know, please fund us. We have a lot of allies who I think are interested in helping us, but we're not going to be able to go grab $700 million from any place, right? So we're really putting together pieces. I want the staff to explain the pots that we're looking at, so that you understand what the options really are or aren't. And I think it's important because all of you should be involved in making sure that we're putting pressure on the folks who should be giving us money for this project, given how much money our voters have given. So that's going to be really important, even if they're not big pots, because every penny is going to count. And then lastly, I think that as the materials come forward, and the BART Phase 2 Subcommittee is a great place to practice. But I just want to compliment you. This was a very well-done presentation, very clear. It allowed you to get good feedback. And colleagues, it's annotated, so everybody knows how long they're talking. But I would practice once with mere mortals, only because it will help you get the questions, I think, in terms of how the material should be presented. So the outline I just gave you, that should be reviewed with Sergio, and I would say Pat is the chair of the other committee, so that we're able to be more responsive to the board. And then just, this is more to the city of San Jose. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the city itself because of where this construction is going to go through. But some pressure about, can't you compromise here, can't you compromise there? The one thing I want to recommend, and I don't know how we build it in, but it is really important to make sure that the board as a whole understands the pathway that we're building under and how much private investment and public investment has already been made along that trajectory. Because I will say out loud what many people probably think, which is that it took us so long to recover from light rail being built into downtown, that anybody who's still alive has has this visceral reaction to how bad that was for downtown and for its recovery. And the fact that the city has done, I think, a very good job on getting more private investment in that thoroughfare. I think this board needs to understand the implications of that, because there will be pressure, and good pressure. We should have a conversation about how to make this is something we're building for generations, hundreds of years to come, right? So, but I think absent understanding that, it's not clear why we wouldn't recommend, one path or another. And I do just want to reiterate as part of that, the point that Harry raised about the customer experience. Like, are they going to care or no under, I don't know. I don't think so. I think they just want a smooth, safe ride. But for the people we're trying to get to lease up buildings, you guys are trying to keep the sharks here. There's a lot happening, and it impacts not just San Jose, but this has repercussions for every city in our county. So I'm just going to ask through our executive officer and through the mayor that we figure out a way to make sure that that presentation is very clear. And we may want to do the same for Santa Clara as well, because I think it's going to be important as we're making decisions that we're doing it in the most judicious way possible. And the only way to do that is to have both the information, but to understand, frankly, the trade-offs financially for the private sector as well as the public sector. Is that comfortable for everybody? Everybody got that? Okay. Did I capture everybody's thoughts? Did I leave anything out? Suds, I left something out. Go ahead, Suds.
You didn't leave anything out, but I just wanted to say, on Monday, there was a tour of the little Portugal station. So we had people from the CWG come, and they got to see where the north shaft is, the ventilation shaft is going to be. And they got to see the Five Wounds Church and how it's going to impact that. So we should have more of those. We should have more of the community members come out and give us feedback like we did at the CWG meeting a couple of days ago, where, we had this voting system with fists, and all these fists came up opposing changes to the aesthetics. But in terms of like our contracts, like you were talking, they should be more publicly accessible. But I wanted to understand, in terms of sharing the risk, we just saw that interest rates were dropped and we see inflation's coming down. I want to make sure that in these contracts that that's incorporated. If it continues to, interest rates continue to drop, that we share in the benefit of that. So, and then finally, for the Santa Clara station, I had asked for a people flow simulation. And we actually got to see people walking through the station. And as we have these escalator things, I want to see more of those for the public. And we saw that there was a bottleneck at the fare gates. So I think those are important, and we need to really invest in showing the public what it's going to feel like going through these stations.
And I think that's a great point, and I'll ask staff to look for opportunities to do that. And again, I have some ideas about how we can make sure that everybody's up to date, and I'll give some more thought to them. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to wrap up this section. We're only remarkably 15 minutes behind. I need everybody to hang in there because we're talking about the business plan, which also has some long-term implications for all of us. And so thank you to the staff, and we'll look forward to more work working with all of you. Thank you. All right, business plan team. Dramatic drum roll. And Carolyn's going to we'll just take.
Yeah,
Get us started.
I'm going to put all the presenters at the front for each of the business lines.
Yeah, should we just explain? So colleagues, I know this will seem like a longer presentation, but if I could ask, as you guys are going to have all of the slides in front of you, I'd like to ask the staff to go through the entire presentation instead of taking the breaks, because I think it might allow for the questions to be more informed, more rich, and more robust, and the feedback to be the same. And I know it'll be a little longer, and the staff hadn't planned on that, but we're doing that because we just lost 15 minutes, and I think it'll be a way to get it back. Because I know all of you have hard stops at noon. Thank you.
With you.
So if the staff could just come forward and be prepared to present. So all of you are going to present at one time. Everybody come up. You're speaking tonight, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'll talk to you.
Welcome. And I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn.
Okay. Oh, there it goes. Okay. All right. So I am excited to have the discussion with the board on the business plan. And I appreciate that the standing committees have engaged in developing this plan over the last several months. This is VTA's first business plan that's going to be of major importance since actually the late 1990s, where there was one developed when we had our first strategic plan. So this business plan does build on our existing strategic plan. So in the strategic plan, VTA divided our work into 3 core business lines. 3 business lines form the foundation of our work at VTA and provides a clear direction on our efforts moving forward. And the business plan is an opportunity for us to determine how best to focus on the business lines as well as set the goals and the strategies that we want to implement for each business line during the next 2 years. As part of this effort, we also took the opportunity to make a slight revision to the business lines, as well as adding a fourth business line to focus on our workforce. I'd also note that these discussions today will help us to develop a new strategic plan next year. The 4 business lines serve as the basis of the business plan, and the first business line is fast, frequent, and reliable transit. And at VTA, we want to ensure that transit is fast, clean, and safe for everyone, and a key objective is to improve ridership while operating efficiently. Key to increasing ridership is enhancing our customer experience and understanding their needs. The second business line is project and program delivery excellence. We want to deliver projects and programs that are of high quality, on time, and on budget. And delivery excellence is key to maintain fiscal health going forward and enhancing our brand. And that leads us to be able to support our continued efforts for revenue opportunities such as grants and ballot measures. And the third business line is mobility solutions through partnerships. And as the Congestion Management Agency, we work with our local jurisdiction, regional agencies, state and federal departments, community-based organizations, and business interests to build partnerships to address climate change, reduce VMT, and provide mobility options. And the fourth business line is workforce development and well-being. And key to delivering any of the work in any of the business lines is having a strong workforce. And the business line is focused on ensuring that VTA is a desirable place to work where employees are valued and well-being is prioritized. So today you'll see the KPIs with targets presented, and they are representative, they're not all encompassing of the business lines. And we have worked to refine and modify to address these measures that provide a cross-section of how well VTA is doing in performing its business lines, and I do expect some feedback on that today. And we also provide some initiatives as well, and I'm excited about some of those going forward that we'll talk about, which is a rollout of Phase 1, the Visionary Network, developing a customer experience action plan, working with the agencies on signal priority for our buses and the light rail, developing and standing up the change integration team as part of our climate and culture change transformation, getting the FFGA for BART, and developing the strategic plan, and really developing the vision and the funding elements for being able to move forward our vision for transit in this county. So I look forward to today's discussion. I'm now turning it over to Deborah DeGang to present the agenda.
All right. Thank you, Carolyn. Hi, all. I'm Deborah DeGang, Chief of Planning here at VTA. And what we're presenting to you today is building on the presentations we've been making to the standing committees, and really appreciate all your feedback that we've received over the last 4 months. In particular, I wanted to mention that a significant part of that feedback, as Carolyn mentioned, was adding that fourth business line on growing our workforce. So we were really pleased to do that. We've also refined the goals and identified draft KPIs and metrics with your assistance. So today, what we're going to focus on are, for each of those metrics, what are the specific targets, and how are we going to measure those metrics, and what are the most recent values? I do want to mention that when we're saying targets in the context of this 2-year business plan, we are focused on what we're trying to achieve by the end of calendar year 2026. As we document the business plan, we'll also talk about those that have an ultimate target that may be different, but we're trying to keep the business plan focused on an aspirational goal, but still a goal that can be achieved within 2 years. We're also going to identify the frequency that we'll be reporting each metric. Some are monthly, some are quarterly, some are annually, and there's one that's even every 2 years, so that you can have an expectation of the level of detail you get at each regular reporting. For each of the goals, we'll also do an initial discussion, as Carolyn mentioned, about the strategies and pull out some key initiatives. And I want to echo what Carolyn said, is pleased with all the metrics, with all of the strategies we're talking about. We are not saying this is everything that we're doing. Trying to say every single goal or every single strategy and every metric would just be so comprehensive that it'd be difficult to pull together in a way that's easily to consume. And so we're really trying to highlight some key areas. And then finally, we're going to outline the next steps that will take us to the adoption of the 25-26 business plan at the November 7th board meeting. So I think you've all seen this before. Just wanted to emphasize that we're now in that draft stage timeline. So bringing the draft to you here today, we'll work on incorporating the comments that we receive and bring the revised draft to both the advisory and standing committees. Given the timing, some of that will be kind of in process as we're going, with the ultimate goal to be back with you in November for adoption of the business plan. As Carolyn mentioned, we have 4 business lines. I won't go through this in detail, but just to remind you that we have 4 business lines. Each of the business lines, we've worked with you to identify 4 goals that you've approved. And so what we're going to do is have a chief take the lead walking you through a business line. I will emphasize that all of the divisions will be involved in all these business lines, and we have additional chief and staff here to answer if you have specific questions. But we really want to communicate to you that this is something that we all own as an executive team, and that is very important. So, and that we'll pause for discussion at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Great. Let's do take 2. So once again, good morning to Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Scott Haywood, and I am the Interim Chief of Staff for VTA, and I'm going to be giving an update on business line number 1. So let's begin with the slide that you see on the screen here, and this does cover the business line of fast, frequent, and reliable transit. The chart shows the goals, KPIs, and metrics that have been previously reviewed by all the standing committees. What's new is that since we presented this last, staff have developed targets, the current condition, and the reporting frequency for each of the goals. As you can see, there's an awful lot here on the slide to dig into. However, as Carolyn mentioned, what we wanted to do today is spend this time focusing on 3 main KPIs and targets, which staff believe have the potential to be the most impactful within the 2-year business plan. We will have time later to discuss the input members may have on the individual targets or metrics. But for now, let's review the 3 main KPIs for this business line. The first one is ridership growth. So one of our primary objectives for business line 1 is to enhance ridership. The team continues to focus on increasing ridership by delivering quality service. To measure progress, operations is concentrating on the ridership growth rate as a key performance indicator. We track ridership on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis through various reports, including the Transit Operations Performance Report, or TOPR. Our goal is to achieve a 4% increase compared to the previous year. Now, the chart above shows the overview of system ridership for fiscal year 24, comparing both bus and rail services versus the 4% projected growth goal. As for fiscal year 2024, system ridership grew by 21.3%. VTA continues to rebound from the COVID pandemic and has now reached about 80% of pre-pandemic ridership levels. Another key performance indicator that we want to highlight for this business line is the cost per vehicle mile. Now, this is calculated by dividing the total operational cost by the total vehicle revenue miles. Our budgeted targets for this metric are $17.44 for bus and $60.64 for light rail. We track this metric annually. Currently, the cost per mile per bus is $17.68, which exceeds our budgeted goal. However, on the other hand, the cost per vehicle per mile for light rail is $56.35, which is within our target of $60.64. The final KPI is the Net Promoter Score. Now, this is a measure used to gauge customer loyalty, satisfaction, and enthusiasm with VTA. It is calculated by asking customers one very simple question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend VTA to a friend or a colleague? NPS scores are intended to help us improve service and customer support, as well as to increase customer loyalty. Our most recent score from 2023 was +5, and we are recommending +15 as our target. VTA will continue to and remain customer-focused. Our alignment with the Visionary Network and partnering with other agencies to implement key projects, including transit signal priority and improve service and grow the satisfaction levels of our customer, are all keys to improving our Net Promoter Score. Now, for each goal, we have identified a number of strategies for the next 2 years, and the list you can see here is on the slide.
Similar to the targets, we will have time to receive any input members may have on the draft strategies. However, we want to focus on 4 key initiatives in this business line that we think can really move the needle in the next 2 years of the business plan. The first is to implement the first phase of the Visionary Network, which would increase service hours for weekend bus and light rail service. This will add an additional 58,000 service hours to our existing network and cost approximately $7.3 million annually. The second key strategy is to implement the maintenance inventory assessment as well as develop standards. This effort will help us improve our maintenance operations as well as our efficiencies. The third strategy is to increase security personnel on our system. A major element of this will include rescoping our current security contract. The final strategy is to implement a customer survey on an annual basis. This will provide key data points for us regarding passenger satisfaction and needs. It will also allow us to better serve the needs of our customers and will help us design a customer experience action plan to improve the customer experience, something which we talked quite a bit about in our last item. With that, this concludes my overview of Business Line 1, and I'll now turn it over to Greg Richardson to cover Business Line number 2.
Good morning, Board. Greg Richardson, Assistant General Manager and CFO, and I will be providing you the information related to Business Line 2, identified as Project and Program Delivery Excellence. Now, this business line focuses on efforts not only on our core transit operations, but also on the many programs and projects in progress or this for the projects in progress and to be developed that address current and evolving multimodal needs of Silicon Valley and really our ability to deliver those projects effectively and efficiently. Now, this slide, as Scott talked about on Business Line 1, reflects the goals, KPIs, and metrics discussed and reviewed in previous standing committees. This matrix now reflects the current state of each indicator along with the target for 2026 and the intended frequency of those metrics. Now, before we discuss a few of these indicators, I did want to provide some clarity or context on what is meant by project and/or programs. So when we think about projects, from my perspective, we're probably talking more about likely capital in nature, singular items, likely specific elements that might be part of programs themselves. So an example might be EBRC project or a singular highway interchange project as part of the highway program. Programs are going to be a little bit more global in focus within the agency, so BSV2, congestion management, express lanes, transit-oriented communities, transit operations, and brand recognition are more program-specific when we talk about these. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about some of the specific KPIs. So as the business line states, program delivery is a primary goal for this business line, and measuring our ability to program and allocate necessary funds to our partner agencies so they may be deployed quickly and where needed is critical. The measure will simply be stated as a percentage of all formula funds programmed to our member agencies versus the total amount of formula funds available to program and is intended to be reported annually. We currently sit at 96% with a target of reaching 100%. Although each agency has some impact on our ability to reach 100%, it is our communication and engagement with the member agencies that is most critical, and not reaching 100% will tell us we need to do more to reach our partners. The second KPI is really focused on maintaining fiscal health, which is a critical goal for this business line, and achieving cost effectiveness is one measure to achieve this that we will focus on as we move forward. The key performance indicator we will measure is cost per passenger trip, which essentially identifies the average cost of providing a single passenger trip. This is calculated with total operating costs as the numerator and total passenger trips, also identified as passenger count, as the denominator, and will be reported on a quarterly basis. How this measurement moves over a reporting period should give us a good indication of how efficient our service is and how effective any changes that are made that we've made are being done. Our current cost per passenger trip is $66.58 with a target in 2026 of $60. The third KPI and the last metric we'll discuss is focused on enhancing the VTA brand through communication and engagement. The KPI shown here, although I think it needs to be renamed possibly, is to increase media placements and social media followers. Telling our story and telling the story of our passengers is an important piece of informing the public of who we are, what we do, and how we make a difference in the lives of those in our community. It also allows us to stay connected to communities who may be impacted by projects or programs and events, and helps us enhance those relationships with community members. And we do that through media placements to share these stories directly, and through developing followers on social media so they can multiply our reach to the community. For media placements, our current placements are at 32 with a target of 40 by 2026. And for social media followers, we currently sit at approximately 43,000 with a target of 46,000. Both of those targets are reported annually. The next slide, as Scott had talked about, is really all of the strategies that are identified within each of the goals to achieve the success with Business Line 2. This can and likely will be refined as we get closer to finalizing the overall business plan. But we'll talk a little bit more about specific items on the next slide. Although these will not be the only initiatives we focus on, they are seen as critical to the agency as we move forward. First and foremost, as we just had a session discussed previously, delivering the BSV2 project and program to the Bay Area has been and will continue to be a focus really for all of us. Another one is selecting and implementing a new Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP, and Enterprise Asset Management, or EAM, platforms for the agency has been in the works for over a year now, and the critical steps to its success will be starting very soon. Also, new and relevant content on social media to increase visibility and improve search engine rankings and algorithms will be critical to what we do. And then also developing the strategic plan, the expenditure plan, and the funding plan for express lane phasing and construction. The goal here is to generate new revenue to support transit operations. And then also ensure our voice is heard on any developments related to a new revenue measure, either for Santa Clara or for the region. This ends the item for Business Line 2, and I think I'm turning it back over to Deborah.
Correct. That microphone works. Hello again, Deborah DeGang, Chief of Planning here at VTA, and I'd like to talk to you about Business Line 3, which we've titled Mobility Solutions Through Partnerships. So this really focuses on our role as a multimodal agency and the relationships and partnerships we have both with the general public but also with our member agencies, so 15 cities in the county. Similar to the first two business lines, this slide shows the 2026 targets, as well as the current values and reporting frequency for each KPI and metric by goal. I'm going to focus on the two KPIs that are representative for this business line and that we think will be the most impactful over the two-year business plan. Also, keeping in mind, we are trying to identify about, I don't know the exact count, 10 to 12 metrics overall so that we could really create that initial one-page dashboard when you get the reporting. Equity is forefront in the mind of much of the decision-making we do here at VTA when it comes to investing in projects. And it's something that we've come up with this measure to really show to you how are we investing in our equity priority communities. They are the ones that are shown in pink. Somehow it always comes out lighter on the screen than it does on the printed page. We will darken that for the future. And our goal is to even increase. 40% of the projects we do now are in equity priority communities, and our goal is to increase that to 50%. This is something we will track on an annual basis, and again, this includes all projects that we're doing. The second item that we've identified that we think is really indicative of our relationship with our member agencies is which of our member agencies have a transit signal priority policy. This is a critical policy to having a positive impact on transit speed and reliability, but we also think it really helps develop our relationship with our member agencies about how important multimodal transportation is. We currently have one agency with an adopted policy. We think it's realistic. We've gotten feedback from a number of cities that they're interested in getting that up to 4 within a 2-year period. It'll take a concerted effort, but we're committed to doing that, and we're working on drafting a policy that could be used as a template. I will say that our ultimate goal would be to get this to 11 agencies total, 10 cities in the county, because that represents those cities that have the frequent network running through their city at this time. So that's our ultimate goal. Similar to the first few business lines, we've identified a number of strategies, some high level, some more specific, that we think will move the needle in achieving these goals. And again, these aren't representative of all the strategies that we're doing, but really the ones we want to focus on within the next 2 years for this business line. And for that, we've identified a set of a set of initiatives that we think will be the most impactful on moving those metrics within the 2-year period. The first is identify funding for zero-emission buses and maintenance facility improvements. For example, our ultimate goal is to have 100% of our buses be zero-emission. We don't think we're going to get to that goal within 2 years, but we do have a goal that we'll get to 8%. But even past that, what do we need to do to identify funding, both for the buses themselves, but also the capital investments? The second is to work with our member agencies to expand TDM programs and services throughout the county. This is an example of an area that it's really led by the cities and the TMAs, but as the county transportation agency, we would like to partner with all of the cities in the county in developing guidelines, sharing experience between the cities, and being a resource with you to advocate at the local level. The next one is to revisit our Safe Streets corridor list. We've been very successful working with the member agencies doing complete street studies. So in the next 2 years, we want to come up with our next wish list of where we want to do those throughout the county. And then, as I mentioned previously, working with member agencies to adopt a TSP policy. So with that, I will hand it over to Sonia for the fourth business line.
Good morning. Sonia Morrison, Chief People Officer for VTA. So I'm here to give an update on Business Line 4, which is Workforce Development and Wellbeing. And this is my area, and it's very close to my heart, so I'm enthusiastic to share this with you. So as my colleagues have said, this chart shows the goals, KPIs, metrics, and it also has targets and the current condition, as well as the frequency for each of the goals. As you can see, there is a lot of information on these slides, so I'm going to do the same as the others and focus on 3 KPIs that staff believe have the potential to move the needle on these goals. Then we'll have time to discuss input later. One of our primary objectives for Business Line 4 is to improve the employee experience working at VTA. We've been working hard the last few years to improve employee experience through the work of the Culture and Climate initiatives, our focus on employee well-being, improved safety programs, expanded employee engagement and DEI initiatives, and many other employee-centric programs that we've implemented. A common measurement of this is how likely VTA employees are to recommend VTA as an employer to people who are close to them. We started tracking this metric with the first Culture and Climate survey in late 2022, and we'll again report on this in the second annual Culture and Climate survey, which is opening in late October. Our goal is to achieve an increase from 57% to 65% of employees who would agree or strongly agree that they would recommend VTA as an employer to their closest friends. Another key performance indicator that we want to highlight for this business line is time to hire. This is the average time to hire for all of our recruitments across VTA. Time to hire means the time from when HR receives a requisition to fill a position to the time that we've created a hire date for the new candidate. This is an important metric as it speaks to the candidate experience, the hiring manager experience, and the VTA ability to fill positions and maintain productivity across the agency. It's a measure of how well our recruitment process and customer service are adapting to the changing and increasing challenges in the Bay Area hiring market. Our target for this metric is 105 days. We're currently at 112. We've worked very hard on this metric, and we're currently 38 days faster than all agencies who use NeoGov, which is our applicant tracking system, which the majority of public agencies that we compete with staff for use. The final KPI is turnover rate. Excessive turnover drives up costs and diverts time and attention away from VTA's organizational goals. It can lead to a loss of institutional knowledge and hinder our efforts to foster a better culture at VTA. It's calculated by dividing the number of full-time employees who leave during a time period by the average of number of employees in the organization at that time. We measure this quarterly. Our most recent rate was 2.1%, and we're recommending 2% as our target. For each goal, we've identified a number of strategies over the next 2 years. Very busy slide again, because we're very busy. Similar to the targets, we'll have time to receive input from you that you might have on these draft strategies. However, I'm going to focus on 4 key initiatives that we think will move the needle over the next 2 years. And as my colleagues have said, there are many more things that we either have identified or will identify over the next 2 years that will be included in this list. The first key initiative is to implement the initiatives from the Culture Climate Assessment from 2022 through the 3 work streams that we have that are collaborative labor management work streams. The second strategy is to partner with outside organizations to increase a diverse candidate stream of ready-to-hire employees. For example, veterans leaving the military, foster youth aging out of the program, and formerly incarcerated individuals are going to be part of our focus. The third strategy is to create career ladders and offer career counseling for employees. This has been something that many employees have been asking about. And our talent development division in HR has already started working on this in conjunction with one of the culture climate work streams, the employee support and leadership development work stream. The final strategy is to expand supervisory development training, which we and the operations team have been working very hard on. We want to expand that to include employees who want to be supervisors in VTA. So this might be people that are leads or forepersons or not yet in one of those positions that wish to become supervisors. So this concludes the overview of business line number 4, and we're looking forward to any feedback that you may have on the targets and the strategies that have been highlighted.
So I am going to wrap up our presentation with next steps, and I hope you appreciate how smooth we were at handing off the clicker. I thought that was like really good. We didn't even practice that. So where do we go from here? As you can see, a lot of work has gone into developing these, but we still have time to, take your comments, update information. In particular, as we develop the draft document, those graphics that you see, we'll do something similar to that for all. It's about 50 metrics that we have. We'll do something similar for all 50 metrics, as well as provide a little bit more detail on them, what the source, what the basis of developing the targets. And then we will also present the finalized strategies and initiatives. Our plan is to take an initial draft to the advisory committees. That'll still be probably mostly focused on what we had here today with a little bit more detail. Come to the standing committees in October with some draft presentations, and then have the final document to you at your November 7th board meeting. And with that, we'd be happy to take questions and discuss.
Great, thank you. I'm going to first go to public comment, and I'm going to start with those in the room. I have one public card, and that's Harry Neal, and then if there's any online, and then I'll come back to my colleagues. We outlasted Harry, I'm sorry. Is there anybody online?
No, Chair, there is not.
All right, I'm going to go right to my colleagues. Colleagues, if it's okay, I do want to start with just to say that the mayor let me know he was really disappointed that he had to leave early, which just shows how geeky all of us are. But he was saying that you made a lot of progress, and he'll want to get a meeting with you offline. And he had some feedback, but I'm going to wait to see if my colleagues give that same feedback, and if not, I'll chime in. So I'm going to start with Deb, and I'm going to see if there's anybody else. I'm looking around my Otto, and, okay, wait, so, thank you. Otto, Suds, and Pat. Thank you. Deb.
Thank you for the presentation. This is a ton of info, and I know it's going to take me some time to digest it. I do have 2 kind of main areas that I want to talk about. First, for the business line 1, when we go to the kind of the overall slide about targets and current, there are some of the targets that are less ambitious than what's happening currently, and if you talked about that while I was out, please let me know. But I'm wondering kind of how the targets got set. So, for example, the miles between road failures was the one that kind of stuck out for me. And then you talked about kind of the operational costs, how the light rail is already lower than kind of what the target is. So can you talk a little bit about why we're setting the targets differently than what we're already experiencing?
There's a couple quick answers, and Lisa Vickery, who's one of our deputy directors in operations, can also respond to this. I would say there's a combination of reasons. So we did look at the targets individually for many of these. In some of these cases, the targets that we currently list is our current budget. So as we develop next year's budget, we would update that target. So that some of those were good news. In other cases, the targets are industry standards. And so we do have that opportunity to say, do we want to continue to exceed the industry standard and revisit that target? But again, as we document the business line, we will give more information, but I'll turn over to Lisa to be more specific.
You said what I was going to say. Industry standards is generally the answer for most of those that you're identifying. The miles between road failures is one that's commonly used as a target.
Okay, and then I guess, I know so our buses, are they sort of industry standard buses, or are I think we are a little bit on the cutting edge of our bus acquisitions, and so it would make sense that we would have more miles before we would need, before there would be road failures. And obviously, I think I don't think we want to go to road failures anyway, right? Like you actually want that to be infinite because you have maintenance so that you never actually get to road failures because that causes service disruptions. So I guess just pulling that one out, I think that longer is better, and that industry standard is not what we're going for because we actually want to provide a better customer experience than, breakdowns and service disruptions. And I don't know if
Just an immediate thought on that, and I meant to mention this in my comments, is as this is the first time we've done targets of this type, one of the things we're looking at is learning through this 2-year process. So as Carolyn mentioned, we're going to update the entire strategic plan starting next year. We'll also revise the business plan every 2 years. So I think this is a great example of one that we can learn over time whether or not our buses operate consistently above, and that we adjust the targets, whether we do it now or in the future. But I think that is important that the targets we're setting now are really for this 2-year period, and they could change as we learn more.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, and I think it would be helpful in the future that I understand we're sort of baselining right now, but choosing what we're going to have be stretch targets versus what we're going to have to be sort of, a baseline expectation type of target. So just, I know there's going to be further discussion about that, but it would kind of be good to know which of these are stretch and which of these are like industry standard or just kind of, that's a baseline. And then in terms of the workforce on business line 4, we don't have anything in there about absences, and I know absences are a very disruptive for our bus service and our light rail service in particular. And so I'm curious why we don't have that as one of our targets and one of our pull out, like, very important metrics to try to get our arms around.
I think probably because this business line is about employee development and well-being and less around service disruption. And so we chose targets and strategies that were around
Yeah, no, I
employee
understand that,
development.
but I think employee absences also gets at not only their development, but also their morale and their well-being, right? And so it's about the relationship between our employees and us that we're actually measuring. So yes, there's a downstream service disruption issue, which I think makes it all the more important for us to get at why are those absences occurring and what is our culture doing to contribute to those absences.
I think, just to reinforce one point, Deb, that you're making, I do think that one challenge we have overall with the work we're doing relative to culture is that I don't think we've gotten to the root cause level of of this body of work in the organization. And so that's why the indicators that you're talking about are so critical, because I think we're going to have to work bottom up and top down again to get to them. So I just want to reinforce the point she's raising, and I think it's really critical.
Yeah, thank you. That's it.
I'm going to now go, I apologize, my handwriting's about Otto. And let me just say Otto, Suds, Pat, Lynette, and then Sergio. Were you on?
Yeah, thank you so much. So on the big picture issue that I always look at is the ridership, and in this case, it also is reflected on the business line too regarding the cost per passenger trip. Our target on 26 is $60, and then our current came out to be 10% higher, $66.58. As we understand the system, is that our denominator don't change that much. The cost to run buses costs as much. The cost of running the light rail system, which is very high, is practically fixed in most instances, right? So in order to change this number, really is about how many people we could get folks to be riding our system. And let's say we could somehow double our ridership, like from this year, from last year, then I would say the cost per passenger trip probably will be halved, roughly, right? So I'm just want to use that as an example to talk about this number. One and two is, I'm only looking at us here. Do we have some other jurisdiction that we could look at to compare San Francisco, LA, and even further out in terms of other areas of what their cost per passenger trip is, especially those that have both a mixed bus and light rail system, and make that comparison?
So I can take a first cut at that. One is, when we developed the target, we did include an estimate of what we're trying to save in terms of operating costs combined with the increase in ridership. So we are looking at how we're thinking about adjusting both the numerator and denominator. And to your point about, we can include that in the documentation of the business plan or in subsequent documentation if we are not able to pull it together by November 7th, is going back to the previous question of which of these targets are industry standards, that if there is an industry standard and we're setting the target differently, have a little discussion as to why that is.
Deborah, is this is cost per passenger trip,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is and this is the $60.
Correct.
Where we're going down. Okay, so I think if you look in the operating plan, I think the one that Derek Calhoun puts together as a COO, he has a different target. He has roughly around $33 in some sense, which is where he's trying to get, which is a long-term, the ultimate goal. We put what we thought we could get to by 2026. It's because it is a goal. Really, it's increasing the ridership and a combination of trying to get the costs down. So I think we were thinking, okay, if we can try to get our ridership up 4% and we can do whatever, we can maybe hit the 60. But our goal is, and you'll see that that's why you'll see a difference in what he will report. He's trying to get to $33 and like 78 cents or something. And when we something like that.
Good job.
I do have these weird numbers that stick in my head, but when we write the business plan and write it up, we will put that information in, so that'll be
And
detailed.
one thing I would just, again, I think this would just be important because there's a lot of information, you all live and breathe it, so what we digest comes from very different reports. But I would say that the stretch goal or the 5-10-year goal should actually be included in the matrix so that the board understands this is where we're going to, and this is how close we are to hitting it or not. Because I think to get it in pieces and even to get it in the verbiage, it doesn't give you something that you can keep and say, oh, I'm going to come back and, this is what I'm going to be looking at. And especially because a number of the board members, some will be on a shorter period of time, but for those who will be on a longer period of time, they really will be able to help the organization understand what it was trying to accomplish. Yes.
Yeah, so if you could, yeah, exactly. If you could put in the ultimate goal and how long and then also some comparison with other neighboring jurisdictions, I think it'd be helpful for us to kind of gauge how effective we are in terms of cost per passenger. And it really is how much more we need to do to increase the ridership, right? It's always back down to that one issue is ridership. So thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. And Suds?
Yeah, can we go to slide 8? It compares the cost per vehicle mile between bus and light rail, and they're dramatically different. And is that just per mile that we're operating? so it doesn't depend on the number of passengers. It's not passenger mile, it's just the operations. And what I wanted to understand, so what I wanted to understand is, the buses are so much cheaper per mile, it seems from this, but like BRT has a lot more infrastructure to it. And I imagine for BRT, the cost per vehicle mile is quite different than this.
So I'll ask Lisa to answer that.
Yeah, that would be accurate. The BRT, any of the capital improvements that need to be made to run specialized bus service is going to fall somewhere between the number that we have here for bus in general and light rail in general. And yes, light rail is tremendously more expensive to operate for all of the reasons that you're suspecting BRT would be more expensive than normal bus service.
So I would ask that we add a third category here to look at BRT, because what we want to look at is if we're expanding service, do we want to invest in light rail or do we want to invest in BRT to get,
Yeah.
quicker?
So we can look at whether or not we have the data defined that way. One thing I would say is every single BRT project also gets defined differently. So how much, that cost per mile for BRT may not be as standard as you're thinking, because you can decide to do.
I think
nicer
even
stations,
that point
Yeah,
is the point.
yeah. There's a range.
Right, and I think the point that is being made, especially as it relates to light rails, under what terms and conditions are we going to expand, change the grading, blah, 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 versus looking at bus rapid transit. So, good points, and I'll ask the staff to take a look at that. Suds, were you still?
And, and then, so, I know it's not maybe a measurable KPI, but one of the issues that I have is, like, when I rode the transit in Las Vegas, they have on their transit app, they have a little thing where you can talk about the cleanliness of the station and, whether the trash is overflowing, and you can do that. And so that's part of the customer service thing that we, is the bus shelter trashed, or,
So now that you and I had that conversation,
Yes,
so
we
I
did.
did talk to Dino Guevara, who actually runs that, and we are in the middle of adding that on. Actually, we have added it on, correct? And so we're making sure now that we're going to start to route it. So if you click that you want to have that information and you want to take a survey, you can provide more information through our transit app now.
Okay.
And we're adding more features, yes.
And I'm going to
Thank you.
keep beating this drum that, there are people that ride because they don't have cars, they don't have other options, but there are people like me that have a car, and you want to get me out of my car. So how do you make the service attractive to get me out of my car? So, and then finally, for Business Line 3, I really want to see VMT somewhere in there, tracking VMT as a KPI. And I like the fact that we're putting in TDM stuff there, because I think VTA, we're a congestion management agency, but I don't think we spend enough money and effort on the congestion management part of it, which is VMT reduction and encouraging sample TDM plans for developments in the cities. Like Santa Clara, I got something pretty aggressive put there, but VTA should be driving that. And like bike parking, we did one secure bike parking spot per unit in Santa Clara, and I think VTA is now recommending that, but hasn't pushed it with all the cities. But those types of TDM plans, I'm pleased that it's here, but we need to get the cities to comply. Thank you.
It's Pat?
Yeah, thanks. So first, following up on Sud's comments, this slide that's in front of us is really striking, and it's something that I think we also want to look at the demographics of the riders and understand whether light rail is being used more by higher income riders and buses by lower income, and yet are we putting the greater subsidy for the higher income and yet not having good fare box recovery. And so my guiding principles have been that for higher income users of our system, we should have better enforcement of fare box recovery. And for lower income riders, we should have greater use of transit passes. And that's where, we have a pilot right now that we're doing on transit passes for low-income workers. We only had it before for low-income housing residents. I really think that we should be looking at how to expand that. When we're looking at the metrics on slide 14, for instance, when we're talking about our cost per passenger trip, and as Otto mentioned, if we double the number of riders, that cost per passenger trip really drops. Didn't hit our fare box recovery necessarily, but it really looked at how we're spending our dollars to provide transit service and to whom. And one of the things that we don't have here is cost per passenger mile, which I actually think is an even more important metric than per passenger trip. And I thought that's what I had raised previously as a prospective metric. Is that correct?
Yes, and we'd be happy to add. Part of what we're looking at, and going to your first comment, is there is a lot of data, there's a lot of analysis that would not be included in a dashboard that's at a business plan level. So we were trying to highlight metrics, but keep in mind those monthly operating reports you get from Derek, the monthly safety reports that you give to Aston, our marketing analysis that we do that gives a lot of detail on our customer ridership, the transit performance report that's coming to you in a couple of months. There's a lot more data that we don't envision having in here. So we had picked cost per passenger trip because that is something that is much more of an industry standard, but we can add cost per passenger mile if you request that.
And just to chime in here, I think this speaks to the point that I was just raising a moment ago, which is that I think it would be helpful if you all could maybe further define at the final presentation to the board the purpose of the business plan relative to the other reports. And what I would say is that one thing that I'm observing, even as I've been listening to this discussion in committee and here today, is that, again, you all really understand all the data that you're using to roll up into these. And one recommendation I would make is that when the presentation comes to the board, if there are regular reports that already come to the board under these topics, that there be a hot link to them. So when this gets emailed out to the board, there's a better understanding of what rolls up into the business plan versus what must be in the business plan. Because I think that's what you're toggling with, is how do you keep it to a number of measurements. And that way the board, frankly, they can make the decision about what they want to prioritize and why. And that's a little bit of the exchange we're having with Dev, because we're looking at the issues of the agency maybe somewhat differently than you are, not in a bad way, but just because of where we sit versus where you sit.
Transit passes, I really think that we as an agency with basically generally surplus seats capacity by a lot, right? We're not overflowing. What we want to do is get more people in those seats. And I am convinced, largely because of a 20-year experience in Palo Alto, where we drove a whole series of programs to have transit passes, primarily Caltrain passes and secondarily VTA Smart passes. And that is a big part of why Palo Alto is the second highest boardings in the whole Caltrain system, is because of those programs. Development agreements with Stanford and with Stanford hospitals, our own TMA, expanding to low-income workers. One of the things we haven't done yet is move it into our low-income housing residents. And that the funding for that is really a partnership. We fund our TMA, we negotiate with private entities, and basically VTA provides discounts. But if it's really adding riders who wouldn't otherwise take the system, the discount that VTA provides doesn't cost us. If it's replacing full fare riders, then it's a different story. But when we look at our fare box recovery on buses, we're not replacing a lot of income by getting those additional passengers on at a discount of having a pass. I think this is a fundamental strategic difference that we as a board should be considering. Do we going forward really think that we're going to want to drive ridership by having a higher percentage of people, particularly low-income workers and residents, having passes? And to what extent do we get higher ridership as a result of people having passes? So that's the next data question. Do we know when people have passes how much more they ride?
And so to that end, what I'm going to ask, I mean, maybe if you don't mind, can I ask you this question? What committee looks at ridership now? What's the
It's SST,
SST.
it's S2P&O, and I do think some of we do some surveys around our pass
But what I was
usage.
going to say is that there's a question about the business metric, and then there's a question about the strategy that underpins that. And what I would like to recommend is that for SSTP&O, that maybe, one thing we've been glossing over at the board meetings is we just get the ridership numbers. We haven't talked about them in forever. So maybe the way to do this is have this discussion happen in SSTP&O and then have it come to the full board.
Excellent.
Because I think otherwise, because it doesn't really, I'm just trying to constrain us right here where we're.
No, I wasn't looking for answers today. I
No,
want to
no,
frame
but
the
I'm
issues.
just saying, I'm just focused on
Yep.
what we're trying to accomplish. I have you all for 6 more minutes.
All right.
And I don't want to see more people leave before, because this is such an immediate
Yep.
issue, and
Okay.
we've asked for a lot of information.
And just quickly on 2 other things, glad to see the signalization priority coming back. When originally, years ago, when it came to the cities, the proposal on the bus rapid transit was a signal prioritization. Our city embraced that. And then without notice, VTA came back and said, nope, we've decided it's going to be a dedicated bus lane, and we didn't embrace that. But I think this is going to have more receptivity in cities. Frankly, you said we only have one city that's embraced it, but I haven't seen it come back to our city for a request.
Oh, I'll have a conversation with you about that offline, because I don't know if there's been robust embracing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then lastly, on the satisfaction survey, we don't have there what the participation level is, which is really an important part of that. Thank you.
And actually, that's been raised a number of times, so please include it. Patrice, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, just one comment, Director Byrd. Thank you for all of the comments about the ridership. Yesterday, we were at SSTP&O to talk about the ridership survey, so perhaps we should look at the questions that have come here and bring that back to the broader group.
Thank you. That's
Thanks.
super helpful. All right, I've got Lynette, Otto, and Sergio.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the report. A lot of information and a lot of details. The one thing I didn't see, and expanding on some of the things I would like to see, is measuring input from like the partnering agencies. Because I think as we look at the partnering agencies and the input and data from that, it may help us look at how we can get more companies or.
So we have two measures that I see as a proxy for that. One of them is we are planning to measure the number of regularly scheduled meetings we have with our partner agencies, which we've increased. So now we meet at least twice a year with 8 of the 16-member agencies. So we're looking to how we can increase that over time, and whether that means I need another staff person.
Okay. Because, yeah, that's the goal, right? To increase the partnering agencies, so that's true.
Yeah, and then the TDM program is also a proxy for that in terms of if we're reaching out to the cities more, finding out what their priorities are, helping them to write policies. So, but I think that those are both ways as we report back. Hopefully you'll see that as representative of us interacting with the member agencies more.
Okay, and one more. And thank you for the workforce development information as well. And so are we working with community colleges to develop and maybe we can take a lead there in developing some sort of transit training program through our community colleges or specific certification program, and that would allow more students to see what other opportunities are out there for them. So I would like to see more partnership with the community college or trade schools in creating a more holistic type of transit program.
Thank you.
We do have several really strong relationships. So Lisa can talk about the partnership with Mission College, Mission Peak, I was going to say, Mission College. And we also, with the University of the Pacific, we bring them here to do the Transportation Management Certificate Program, plus the DEI program. So we have a couple of very strong partnerships, plus the Mineta Institute of Transportation with San Jose.
Did you mean to help people learn how to use the system or to actually work in the system?
To actually attract more talent for transit agencies, but if we can expand it to other community colleges, that would be
They're doing amazing work.
Yeah,
in this
you
area.
are.
Lisa, you want to say something about this? Because this is actually one of the areas where I think we are, yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple of different programs currently. Our educational partner agency for 5 apprenticeships that we have for bus operator, coach and light rail operators, service mechanics, overhead line workers, track workers are all with Mission College and our labor management partnerships. We also are developing and expanding our relationship with Metro Ed, working with high school and younger youth. And we have a pre-apprenticeship program that we're launching with San Jose Job Corps. We're the first in the country to develop a pre-apprenticeship program for the youth that they train in the nation. So we'll be one of the locations that's launching that shortly. So we have several that are specific to those technical fields, and we're expanding more. As Sonia mentioned, we really are looking to address and find talent within veterans groups, foster, or folks graduating from foster care, and or aging out, I'm sorry, and other populations that we think are underrepresented in our employee groups, and we'd like to make sure that we're reflecting the public that we serve.
Thank you. It's good to know about the program at Mission College, but I think that the other community colleges would benefit from that too. Thank you.
We also have very strong internship programs, either high school through Cristo Rey or college level, which is community college, and college level internship programs.
Great, thank you. Lynette, did that get your questions? All right, Otto left. I'm going to go to Carmen. Oh, I'm sorry. Otto, I didn't see you. Oh, sorry. Carmen, did you have your hand up too? I can't see the lights. You actually have to. No, there's no magic here. I just, you guys have to like do this.
Okay.
And then I'm all good.
All right.
So I didn't realize you were on the list. I'm going to go to Otto and then Carmen to you, and then I'm going to wrap up. Did I
really
forget
dumb
anybody
question.
else? I'm going to wrap up.
Does
with
our
Sergio.
bus take credit
Sorry,
card?
Sergio.
Okay.
Not yet, right? I mean, obviously, this one you take, right, electronic, and I look it up, I guess with Apple Pay, you could do it through Clipper, and then that way you could do it with your phone, so that you could do that, but credit card is still not doable. So my question here is, how hard would it be to get that implemented?
I did want to mention quickly
Can I
that
just- Before I let you go, you guys, what I really want to focus on today is the metrics that are in front of us. I'm going to let them answer this question, but this is really about metrics. If they're
No, I'll take this offline, it's okay.
No, listen, actually, this is important, so I want to get
Because I
everybody
think it
responded
helped
to. I'm just
increase
reminding.
ridership big time. People
Right.
know they can use credit card.
Yeah.
So the quick answer is, this is actually something I think we should get a better job getting out, is that it turns out everybody already has in their phone, in their Apple Wallet or Google Wallet, the Clipper card already exists there. So you can go directly in there and activate it with a credit card. You don't have to go to Clipper first and set up an account and do that. So just so everybody
And
knows.
just know that once you put your card number in, if you have a plastic card, put it in your account, it no longer works as a plastic card.
Yeah, you have to choose. Yes.
Which is really important.
That's more important to know, because if you.
And let me just say, this should actually go to SS, well, I don't know what committee, but this issue is one that we are constantly engaging with MTC on. So we don't, I would just be honest, we don't have a lot of power in that area. This
Well,
isn't-
I sit on the Clipper Executive Board, and I'm always complaining about things, so you can tell me.
Yeah.
And then I go and say.
But what I was going to suggest, it's not a bad idea to have Clipper come and present to at least one committee, because we don't put enough pressure on them, and they act like it's the Holy Grail, and I've got a lot of bruises from those discussions. So, anything else, Otto? No? Okay. Carmen?
Thank
And
you,
then
Chair. I had a
So don't leave
question
anybody.
for Deborah on the, is it the TSI? No, KPI? No, TSP, sorry about that. Yeah, can,
The TSP KPI, we could talk in all
Right.
acronyms if.
yeah, TSP. So is our city part of that? Are they embracing that, or is that one of the cities?
Oh, well, so I will mention that right now, City of San Jose is, with their Transit First policy, is the one that we're saying has this policy in place. So it's not a criticism of any of the other cities. What we're doing as as an agency is we're drafting a policy that we're planning to take out to the cities and asking them to adopt. So the next step is ours to bring that to your city, but it's good
great.
to hear you're interested.
Okay, that's great, yeah, I'm hoping that they will be interested on that. And the other one is what is it at? The efficiency, that was your presentation, on how to get people interested in, ridership growth? Implement incentives through fare programs to increase usage. How are you going to do that? What are your proposals?
I think that's all of those things that were being evaluated now as far as, we're going to be presenting something to SSTP&O very soon on possible veteran fare program, if that's possible. But I think that's going to lead into other conversations about other fare programs, to Director Burt's point of
Right.
trying to develop ways in which we can incentivize riders.
I think we need to invest. It's just like Palo Alto did. Now they have they're a really robust system where people are taking and it goes back to my proposal you need to invest, you need to provide for high school students, free bus fares, so that way you can condition the students, reduce congestion, and also condition the students to take the buses. And reduce our carbon footprint and reduce congestion. So those are some of my ideas that I'd like to look into that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna, Pam? Oh, no problem, as long as everybody's gonna stay, I'm good. You all can talk as long as you like. Just nobody leaves.
Is
Go
it my
ahead.
turn?
Yeah.
Just a
And then-
quick comment. I'm really glad to see that we're moving forward with transit signal priority. I just want to toot my own horn. I'm the one who brought through transit first policy to the city of San Jose.
Yay! There's some
I just needed to let that
you
be
gotta
known.
toot your
Let
horn.
that go
Go
out
ahead.
publicly to the universe. That's it. Thanks.
Out to the universe, awesome. All right, Sergio.
I'll be really quick. I just want to thank you for an incredible amount of work in a short period of time. Really thoughtful, good work, I think. And also just really emphasize and reaffirm how important it is to continue to make sure that we have input from all the different parts of the organization. And I know the short time frame has been a challenge with that, but that I think is really going to be a critical piece, so that it's really built into the DNA of our organization from the ground up. Thank you.
All right, so I think you've got a lot of feedback. I think this has come a long way. I'm super excited about it. I just want to reinforce three things. One, when this comes to the full board, I do think people understanding what bodies of work roll up into it, as you heard a lot from people today. Two, where are you going, Otto? So two, I can't emphasize enough that I will know that culture change is beginning in this organization when we're not asking about the role of line staff in any body of work. We should be defaulting out. I mean, it should be so embedded that the question is, oh, do we let them out of being involved versus who do we let in? And so I just want to emphasize, when this comes to the board, my expectation is that we're very, I know that there have been conversations with the unions. I met with them yesterday, and they said, yes, it was already baked, not a lot of room. And by the way, they felt not encouraged to give feedback. I don't mean like not intimidated, but just like you were so far along, it was hard for them to know how to do that. I want to emphasize how important, before this comes to the board, that we have had a deep and meaningful discussion with the leadership of the labor movement and any department that you think these are particularly stretch goals, because I think we're going to want to understand that those conversations occurred. And then lastly, I I do also, I know you all think we all know this, but we don't, because we're not on all the committees, I never remember what body of work goes to what committee, so you might actually put the committees that people will be able to engage in, so that there's a little more, like, oh, this is gonna come to my committee, I'll dive into the main strategies. And I'll just remind my colleagues that for you all, the strategy document is going to come after the business plan, which will build into the business plan. So they're using these high metrics, and so there will be changes to our strategies. What's that document called, the next thing? It's a strategic plan? Yes, the strategic plan. So the strategic plan's going to back up into this, and I would ask you to put one slide that just explains this, then this, and just, again, so people understand this is iterative, this will happen in 2 years, then we're going to do a strategic plan that backs up all of that, then we're going to, and that strategic plan really updates the business plan updates the strategic plan, just so everybody understands the flow. Because I also think we think of these documents as being very distinct. I think you think of them as being very embedded, but that's because you're looking at all of it and we're looking at pieces of it. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well done. We are adjourned.